Framed by jealous nobles, Diluc was stripped of his position and exiled to the kingdom's forgotten frontier. Everyone believed the ruined land was beyond saving. But hidden within his so-called useless skill was the power to summon legendary heroes from thousands of years across the past and even the future. Together, they'll rebuild a dying village into the strongest territory the kingdom has ever seen. Can the noble everyone abandoned create a nation that will make the entire world regret casting him aside? A ruined village, no money, and a skill everyone laughed at. Sounds like the perfect beginning of a future kingdom, right? Well, we'll find out now. The story begins with MC thinking that the Summon Ancient skill allows him to summon creatures that lived about 4,000 years ago. These lands are called Tenma, and here such a worthless skill has awakened. However, with this power he will bring an ancient civilization back to life. Earlier in the royal capital of Gatel, he saw an announcement and asked with a surprised expression, "What the hell is this? Send Diluc Rebello to the borderlands of Tenma." But why him? He approached the guard standing at the gate, apologized, and asked if he could not enter the castle. He agreed with a confused tone and said that this was King Gete's order. He was perplexed by what he heard, and he said that he was a loyal assistant whom the king trusted so much, but he was being exiled. They themselves do not know what happened. Everyone knows that the policy he proposed made the country richer. What on earth is the king thinking? He looked at him silently with a confused expression and wondered what was going on here. He was born into a rural family of a count. His family protects people and serves the king. His brothers inherited excellent skills. However, he inherited a strange skill, summoning ancients. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't activate it. However, he didn't give up so easily and began to study diligently. He successfully passed the exams and became the king's assistant. That's how he started working in the castle and entered the king's entourage. He was happy to serve the king and help people, but this still happened. His attention was caught by a guy who came in and asked what was wrong with his face, although everything seemed fine. The skill summoning ancients suits him perfectly. He turned to him and, with a confused look, called out to Acto. He walked up to him, grabbed him by the collar, and with an evil grin, said that he was nothing but a pathetic eyesore, but for some reason, an idiot like him was valued. He also managed to become close to the king. He left him and said with a smirk that all of that was in the past. He never thought the king would exile him so quickly. The protagonist, with an indignant expression, asked what he meant by that. He had a hunch. He was about to say something, but he ignored him and said that he was just doing his job. He never thought that an official like him would try to sweep the country under his control. Something like that could be a problem. He fell to his knees because of what he heard and thought that now it was clear. He had orchestrated everything. Acto went to the castle and loudly said that, by the way, the punishment was still very lenient because the king hadn't even executed him. This beggarly traitor had better leave here quickly. He called him and said that he asked him to take care of the country and not use it for his own interests. He turned to him with an indignant expression and loudly said that he would lecture the villagers. He, with his worthless skills, could not be trusted with such a job. He should give up and leave here. Immediately after that, he entered the castle and the gates slammed loudly behind him. After some time, MC was riding in a carriage and with a dissatisfied expression, wondered how this had come to pass. The coachman called him and said that they would soon arrive in Tenma. He looked into the distance and thought that the borderlands of Tenma. Many races live here, and the authorities have no special power. He also heard that the previous lord of the lands had fled. He asked to listen and said that he apologized for having to lead him so far. He turned to him and said that there was no need to apologize. Tenma would soon be in sight. They left the forest, and he shaded his eyes with his hand because of the bright light of the sun. He was shocked when he saw that he was brought to a ruined village with empty fields and a few dilapidated houses. The coachman noticed his reaction and asked if he needed help with his things. He was examining this settlement and said that first he needed to ask about the mansion. He got off the carriage, walked to the house, continued looking around, and wondered, is this really a village? More like ruins. Do people even live here? He knocked on the door, went inside, asked for forgiveness, and said that he was sent here as a lord. Where can he find a mansion? A girl with a child appeared to him and asked with a confused look. Did he say a mansion? She could show him where the previous lord lived. They came to an old house and she said that she knew it looked bad. However, he tried his best to smile, despite his displeasure, and said that this would do. She said that she needed to go to the mountains. He was surprised by what he heard, turned around, and said that, however, the sun would set soon. She said that they had no food at all. There was no food in their fields, so she went to the mountains to feed her younger sister. She could have shared some with him. He wondered with a surprised expression, what kind of village was this? Why were children starving at this time? Where in this country did such a place come from? Diluc said that then he could go to the mountains instead of her. She was worried and said that he didn't have to do it. He said that she didn't need to worry. He would just look around, and she could deal with his things with the coachman. She agreed to this, thanked him, and he said that she didn't need to worry. After that, he left the village along the path and thought how creepy this forest was, and there was a nasty miasma everywhere. Miasma is air containing magical essence, a very terrible thing that attracts monsters. The skill of summoning ancients is useless here. He's skilled in swordsmanship and has knowledge, so he needs to pull himself together. Suddenly, he heard a very loud scream nearby and immediately ran towards them. He saw several people looking at the monster in horror and immediately used the Robello style. He delivered a powerful blow with his sword and loudly called out the technique, Star Shadow Cleave. He sheathed his sword, and the people asked with a confused look, "Where did such a skilled swordsman come from? Maybe this was just his dream?" The protagonist turned to them with a calm expression and thought that he hadn't done anything serious. It was good that he was weak. However, he heard an angry hiss, turned around, and saw a giant monster that had just crawled towards him. He looked at the villagers and loudly said that they should flee from here immediately. He looked at this monster and thought with a worried expression that it was a great serpent. Danger level A. The villagers couldn't move out of fear. They called the master swordsman and said that they had never seen such a huge serpent before. This monster crawled towards him with a loud sound, and he made a great effort to reflect the attack with his sword and thought that he couldn't handle it alone. The serpent turned sharply and struck with its tail, but he was able to block this blow with his sword. He thought that it had strong scales. No matter how hard he tried, a sword couldn't pierce it. What should he do? How can he save the villagers? Why is he even here? He continued to fight this monster, recalling everything that happened earlier, and thought that he wanted to look into its insolent face again. However, besides that, he wanted to save these people. He had nothing but this worthless skill, but he had to somehow protect them. He continued to block the snake's attacks, and the system notified him that he could activate the Summon Ancient skill. He was surprised by what he saw and asked loudly, "Is this really his skill?" The system window said that he must spend points to activate the storage. MC asked in surprise, "Why did this happen now, and what did all these words mean?" He swung his sword at this monster and loudly said that there was no time to think to activate the skill. At that moment, a very strong magical energy engulfed the huge snake, and it hissed loudly in pain. He looked at the dragon that appeared in front of him with a surprised expression. This dragon called the master and asked what she should do. He realized that it was a white dragon and asked in surprise, "Where did the dragon come from?" The dragon confirmed this, called him by his full name, and asked, "He called her, right?" He looked at her with a shocked expression, and his face blushed slightly. She said that he no longer had anything to worry about. However, he could have defeated such a weak monster alone. He said with a surprised expression that he definitely couldn't, since he didn't even know how to use magic. She said that then he shouldn't worry. The master's skill allows one to use the power of summoned creatures. Right now, he should be filled with magical power. He asked, "Are you sure?" He, like her, could use fireballs. She agreed. He concentrated, breathed on the blade of his sword, and suddenly the weapon in his hands was engulfed in magical flames. He was surprised by the power he felt and asked, "What kind of power is this?" The snake slithered toward him and began to hiss angrily. He felt confident and, with a serious expression, used the Robello style, Star Shadow Slash. He slashed with his sword and was very surprised when he was able to cut through this huge monster with his attack. She flew nearby and asked with a smile, as she said, "Isn't it?" He agreed and turned to the nearby villagers with a worried look. They looked at him with admiration and said that the master swordsman, he was amazing. It was as if a god himself had descended to them. He was glad that they were safe and looked in surprise at the child in the woman's arms. The child, with a joyful expression on his face, extended his hand to Diluc, and because of this, a smile appeared on his face. He turned to the dragon and asked, "By the way, what is her name?" She said that her name is Hakuryu. He called her mistress, and she said that he shouldn't be so polite. After all, he is her master. He stroked her head and asked if such a powerful dragon obeyed him. She asked with a smile if it worried him so much. However, it was not a problem. He had already felt everything. He thought that, by the way, he had recently been able to create a fireball. He asked, since she was here because of his skill, did that mean she came from the past? She confirmed this and said that she did not know the details. However, maybe he should check the skill information. He said with surprise that for sure he needed to look at the status. He opened the system window and it said that one summon was available to him. Summoning the Ancients. This skill allows you to summon creatures that lived about 4,000 years ago. He was surprised by what he read and said that it was written 4,000 years ago. She said that means 4,000 years have passed. She has waited so long. He asked with a surprised expression, did she say waited? Hakuryu agreed and said that she was waiting for a person who would master this skill. Others are also waiting to be summoned to this world. She appeared in this era and asks her lord to take care of her. He agreed, wrote something down in his notebook and said that he still didn't understand much, but this skill was simply incredible. He thought it was not worthless at all. He came across a magnificent skill, then these lands would definitely prosper. At the same time, in an unknown place, the girl said with a little surprise that here he appeared, the one who would become her husband. A little later, they flew on her back, and the villagers said that they were very grateful for letting them fly with them. The protagonist turned to them and said that they didn't have to thank him. She said that it was not difficult for her. The villagers said that, by the way, he was their new lord. He was so reliable. He said with embarrassment that he hadn't done anything yet. The man asked with admiration, What was he talking about? After all, he defeated that snake with one blow. Their lord was such a strong man. He would definitely tell everyone in the village. Hakuryu said it would be glorious if her master's deeds became known to everyone. He was embarrassed by their praise and thought he had been exiled. Then, he became the head of the Tenma borderlands, was able to activate his skill, and even saved people. He said that it wasn't only his merit. He won thanks to her. She gave him her power. She said that a person with the summoning skill can use the powers of summoned spirits. These words caught his attention, and he opened the system window to check it. He read it and said that it seemed he could summon another one. Also, if he accumulated more points, he would be able to summon others. He thought with a thoughtful expression on his face. However, how should he do this? He still had a lot to understand. He took out his notebook and said that all he knew now was that he could summon spirits who lived 4,000 years ago. The man said that this was a period about which nothing was known. He agreed and said that even in the capital's records, there's nothing about that era. The woman said that she heard that it is called the era of the vanished civilization. It is also called the legendary era. He looked into the distance with a smile and said that he wondered what that time was like. They arrived in Tenma, and he said that he would walk around the village for now. MC thanked Hakuryu and said that she helped them a lot. She agreed and said in a satisfied tone that helping the Lord is the duty of spirits. He said with a worried look that, by the way, the villagers would be scared if they saw her. She said that there was no need to worry about that. She disappeared and said that souls that do not have a human appearance can take on a different form. Besides, to summon a spirit that has already been summoned once, no points are required. She will appear at his call. The villagers said that they were grateful to them for today. They can help him clean the house. He said in a confused tone that it is not necessary. He can manage somehow on his own. They'd better share the food with the other residents. The man agreed with a confused look and said that it was fried snake tail. Hakuryu said it was quite tasty. They thanked him again and said goodbye. He waved and said that they should get a good rest. After that, he went inside, looked around his house, and said that spending the night here would be problematic. He remembered the past and thought that compared to the capital, this place looked nondescript. However, it seemed he could get used to it. First, he needed storage for food and water, and also light. He looked at the things here and said that this lamp seemed broken. The water barrels are no longer suitable, and besides, it's the north of the country. The winters here will be colder. Also, things for everyday use are not delivered here. There is so much that needs to be done here. By the way, he could make another summoning. Maybe the summoned spirit could fix the house. It would be nice to summon a strong worker and quickly. He opened the system window and said that he would try to summon a spirit. Activate the ancient summoning skill. The ancient spirit must pass through time and appear before him. A cloud of energy appeared in front of him, and he thought that he couldn't see it last time because of the battle, but this is what the summoning of the ancients is like. By subjugating the ancient spirits, he can use their power. This is his worthless skill that he managed to awaken today. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared, and he wondered what kind of spirit he would summon. He was surprised when a girl appeared in front of him, who stood up and, with a joyful expression, said that she answered his call and was glad to meet the master. Her name was Cindy Keen. She was grateful that he called her. She had waited so long for this day. He repeated her name with a confused expression, and she said with displeasure that it was not at all nice. He could just call her Shi-chan. He was confused again because of this, and she apologized and said that she was just so happy to finally meet him. She will fulfill any of his requests. He can ask for whatever he wants. He said in a thoughtful tone that he wanted to fix the house, but asking a girl for that was a bit too much. She grabbed his hands and asked in a joyful tone, "Is he worried about her? He is a real gentleman. However, she is well versed in alchemy." He thought with a puzzled expression that he had never heard of it. She asked, "Doesn't he know? Then it will be better if she shows him clearly." She created a magic circle and said loudly, "Alchemical transformation." With the help of her magic, she very quickly restored the entire house, including the furniture. She turned to him with a joyful expression and asked how he liked it. Diluc was shocked by what happened and asked what just happened. She laughed with a satisfied look and said that it was quite good. This is alchemy. It is based on the law of equivalent exchange. Using magic, she collected the trees lying nearby. He said in surprise that it was incredible. Could this really be ancient magic? His words caught her attention, and she said that it turned out that this was the future. There is no alchemy in the present era. However, he can use alchemy now too, right? He opened the system window and it was written there that first-level alchemy, by giving an equal amount of energy, he can create various objects. He read it and said that he really can use it. He doesn't fully understand it yet. However, he needs to try. He used alchemical transformation and fixed the lamp. He was surprised at what he did, and Cindy said in a joyful tone that it was great. He did so well the first time. He said in surprise that he felt how the magical energy had decreased, but this way he would be able to create a lot. He immediately transformed chairs and water barrels and said that he did well. She said with a joyful expression that she would help too. He said that another lamp wouldn't hurt them. He trusted her with this. She said with a determined look that he could rely on her. She used an alchemical transformation and created a lamp. This attracted the protagonist's attention. He grabbed her by the shoulders and called out to Cindy in an admiring tone. She cried out in surprise and said that she was not ready yet. He asked in a surprised tone, "Can she create other magical items?" She sighed with slight disappointment and asked, "Is that what he was talking about?" It seemed there would be problems in love affairs. She understood him. He could trust her with all this. She created the items and said, "Here's a glass in which water appears with magic. You can freeze food in this box." He said with a surprised expression that he had definitely never seen anything like it. A lamp like that too. In the current era, there is nothing that could emit so much light. Nowadays, lamps in cities can only illuminate a bed at most. She said that his lamp didn't use magic, but in the past, lamps were turned on by magic. Other items were also commonplace 4,000 years ago. He wondered with a surprised expression, what kind of civilization was there 4,000 years ago? They are superior to them in everything. With such technology, the lives of the residents of Tenma could be improved. He said with a thoughtful look that it would be possible to recreate an ancient civilization. He wondered how advanced this civilization was, which they knew so little about. If only it could be recreated, it would even take his breath away. She said with a smile that she would do for him as much as he asked. She could do more. He was chosen by this skill. Many spirits are eagerly awaiting him. He will also succeed because he is her master. She handed him the lamp and with a joyful expression said that he still has everything ahead of him. MC remembered the past and thought that he was banished, and he came here, activated the skill and acquired a new goal. This is his turning point. He asked, "By the way, what does everything ahead mean?" She was confused by this and asked, "Do they really not say that anymore?" He said with a smile that perhaps they do say it. He likes it. They still have everything ahead of them. He thought that he wants to become better. He wants to revive an ancient civilization and create something new. He wants to make the people of Tenma happy. He extended his hand to her and said that he was asking her to take care of him. Cindy extended her hand back with a joyful expression, agreed with the master, and said that she would always be with him. He said that exactly. They needed to make another bed. She said that one bed would be enough for them. At the same time, in the bushes next to his house, there were two people who were watching him with sly grins. The next morning, she wished him good morning. He responded in kind and said that she woke up early. She said that she was trying to be useful after his summoning. She wanted to cook breakfast and wait for him. She even created kitchen utensils using alchemy, but they didn't have food. She couldn't create food using alchemy. However, she so wanted to feed the master. He said that he was already glad that she thought of him. He, with a thoughtful expression on his face, said that first they should get food. We should take a look at the fields in the village. He said that today they would eat fried snake tail again. She was surprised by what she heard and asked if that was tasty. They left the house and she asked if this was the Tenma village. A man noticed them, with a joyful expression on his face, called the master and said that he was grateful to him for yesterday. He approached him and said that there was no need for thanks. Is he working in the fields today? He agreed and said that he decided to avoid the forest if possible. First, he took up the weeds. As he saw, there were a lot of them here, and they were also short of hands. By the way, who is this girl? Diluc said that for sure he hadn't introduced her yet. Cindy interrupted him, introduced herself, and said that she was the master's future wife. He denied it and said that he summoned her like the dragon. This is their new companion. She said that her skill is alchemy. The man said that there was no such thing at the moment. She began to use magic and said that then she would show him. She created a sickle using alchemy, handed it to him, and he asked with a surprised expression, "She did it so quickly?" She said with a friendly smile that for the sake of her master's dream she would help them too. This tool uses magic. He can experience it. He used it and said with admiration that it even cuts thick roots. He saw something like this for the first time. She said that if he pressed the button, it would become a hoe or a plow. He couldn't believe it and said that such a thing would help everyone in the village. The protagonist praised her and asked if she could make the same for him. She agreed and said that there was one trick to transform a lot of metal. She began to use magic and said that alchemy is an equal exchange. The metal that will become a farming tool attracts magic and changes, taking a specific form. For example, only magical tools made by the master are attracted to each other. He understood her and said that it attracts magic, just like a magnet attracts iron. He used alchemical transformation and created a sickle. She praised him, and he heard some strange sound that caught his attention. He opened the system window, looked at it, and said that it seemed like he was able to accumulate points. This means he can replenish them by helping around the house. She also looked at it and with a happy expression said that it was as expected of the master. He said that if the bar is completely filled, he will be able to summon a new spirit. This can be useful for the residents. This way you can do two things at once. He wanted to say something else, but did not have time to finish because he heard a loud female scream. They turned around abruptly and loudly asked what that scream was. The resident pointed to a house nearby and said that it was from Leticia's house. They quickly ran to that house and loudly asked what happened here. A girl came out of the house, her face full of horror, asking the master to help her sister, who was about to be kidnapped. Inside the house, they saw bandits who grabbed the girl and threatened her with a knife, which worried them greatly. The girl said, in a worried tone, that the villagers and her parents had already been kidnapped. What if they took her sister too? He grabbed his sword, but immediately stopped when the bandit said that he had better not move. If he drew his sword, he would kill the hostage. He took his hands away from the sword and thought that if he called Hakuryu, they might harm the hostage. At this rate, they would kill her. What should he do? Cindy stepped forward, raised her hand, and politely asked if she could distract them for a second. Maybe they could take her hostage instead? He was surprised by what he heard and loudly called her name, and the bandit was confused by this. She calmly said that she just wanted to help the little girl and the village. She wouldn't resist as long as they didn't touch others. It's a good deal, right? He agreed to this exchange, and MC asked what she was even doing. They let the girl go. The bandit grabbed her and said with a smirk that she gave herself up, and then she shouldn't complain. He was a little surprised when he saw her calm smile and realized that she had a plan. The sisters reunited, cried, and she hugged Rin. The bandit said with smirks that everything turned out well. They would soon be living normally. They said goodbye to them, then threw a smoke bomb and ran away from the house, leaving no trace. He approached the girls. Letitia apologized to the master and said that she had to go in her sister's place. He said that it wasn't their fault. Besides, Cindy knows how to use magic. It was so easy for her. He didn't finish and thought that, for sure, she wouldn't have given up so easily. She definitely had a plan. The man fell to the ground in shock from what had happened and asked how they dared to do such a thing. Diluc's attention was drawn to the sickle, filled with energy, lying next to him, and he immediately understood everything. He took it, summoned Hakuryu, and said that she would go with him. She agreed with the master without hesitation, and after some time, the bandits reached their lair. They examined her, laughed loudly, and said that they got a good product. What an easy deal. She would bring them a lot of money. They took her things, but she had nothing valuable. One of them thought that she said that she would not resist, and she was so unperturbed. It was strange. One of them pointed at several tied-up people standing nearby and said that they could not even say a word out of fear. She should go to them. She looked at them and thought that they were the kidnapped villagers. They are to be kept here until the buyers arrive. The bandit said that she would be sold like everyone else. The entrance is blocked, so no one will come in here. She can't even dream of escaping. She said in a calm tone that it was not she who should worry. They did not understand her. And she, with a calm smile, said that her master would definitely come here. The bandit raised his hand to hit her, and in a displeased tone loudly said that she better watch her tongue. He did not have time to strike, because there was a powerful blow behind him, and the other bandits screamed loudly. He turned around abruptly and, looking worried, asked loudly what that sound was. They saw the main character holding a sword with a confident expression and apologized for the wait. They were surprised by this and loudly said that he was that same guy. How did he know about their place? He showed a sickle and said that Cindy told him. Magical energy is attracted. After all, the objects they created have magic, and it is attracted. She, with a joyful expression on her face, said that it was amazing. She believed in him. One of the bandits was worried about this and said that this was already a problem. Another bandit, with a self-confident look, took out a knife and said that he didn't need to worry. Even though he found this place, he could also use magic. However, unexpectedly for him, he quickly ran up to him, used his technique, and quickly defeated him with his sword. The bandits were very scared because of what happened. They did not have time to react, and he quickly defeated them one by one. After that, he tied them up, put his sword back in its sheath, thanked her, and said that he was able to do it only thanks to her. She said in a joyful tone that it was all because of love for the master. This is just a guess, but perhaps she did it out of love for the master, rather than to save people. The tied-up people came out to them and loudly said that this couldn't be. They were saved. He wanted to ask something with a surprised expression on his face, and she said that they had all been kidnapped by those thieves. He went to uncuff them, and she offered her help. He finished freeing the people, after which he went further and saw a place fenced with iron bars. He looked inside, saw demi-humans, and thought that they had been kidnapped into slavery. He approached them, began to free them from their shackles, and asked, "They're not injured, are they?" The man he started to help became confused because of this and asked in a worried tone, "He's really freeing them?" MC, with a friendly smile, agreed and said that they needed to get out of here. He was surprised by this, remembered the past, and said that, however, people had always oppressed them, or wiped their feet and sold. He removed his handcuffs and said that he should not worry, now it's all over. As a lord, he was glad to help them. This title caught his attention, and he asked who he was. He extended his hand and said that it seemed he had not introduced himself. He gave his name and said that he was the Lord of Tenma Village. The man was touched by his words, took his hand, called the man who saved them, and said that he asked to allow him to repay the debt to his village. He thanked him and asked, however, don't they want to return to their home? He said with a smile that he cannot return without repaying the debt. That's what they are, dwarves. Another half-human approached him and said that it concerns them too. They also want to repay him. However, people are afraid of their appearance and the residents of Tenma Village. He didn't have time to finish, because the freed villagers came to them and asked what he was talking about. After all, they had become closer while imprisoned. If anything, they would try to convince the rest of the villagers. Deluxe said that this was great news. The villagers would be glad to see them. He may have just arrived here, but he was absolutely sure of it. They were glad to hear this, nodded in agreement to go with them, and he said that then they should go to the village. After that, they all flew on Hakuryu's back, and he helped them down to the ground. She happily asked the master, "Cindy is doing well, isn't she?" He patted her head and agreed with her. Letitia and her sister ran up to them and called for their parents with a joyful expression. They saw them, called them by name, hugged them, and their father apologized. She hugged her mother and said that everything was fine. They were very glad that they were okay. All the villagers also returned. How could they thank her for this? Cindy said with a smile that she had done nothing, and that she should thank the master. She immediately approached him, grabbed his hands, and said that she would never forget this. The protagonist said with a smile that the main thing was that everything was fine now. He also wanted to introduce them to someone. He pointed to the side and said that they were the dwarves and the bears. They had also been kidnapped by thieves, but they had come here to help rebuild the village. The villagers looked at them with surprised faces, and they felt very uncomfortable about it. Leticia came out to them and said that she was very grateful to them for supporting her parents. They were surprised by this, and one of them asked if they weren't afraid of them. She denied it with a friendly look and said that they were friends who had experienced a common grief. She looked at them with a joyful smile and asked, "Is that so?" The other villagers supported her and said that she was right. They would feel better if they stayed with them. They were touched by what they heard and looked at them with happy faces. They approached him and said that everything was as he said. It was a good village. MC said that he was grateful to them for coming here. He was counting on them. The dwarf said that they would work hard. After all, they were good at building houses. The beastman promised to help them, and he thanked them and said that he was counting on them. After some time, he walked down the city street, holding a small bag of money in his hands, and said that they had received an excellent reward. It seemed that the police themselves did not know what to do. Cindy walked next to him, praised him, and said that they were so confused when they dragged them. He thought that they captured the kidnappers. Several days passed from that moment, and to collect the reward from the police, they arrived in the nearest city. He said with a thoughtful look that they caught people in the village and sold them in this city as slaves. Unpleasant people they came across. She said that not only in Tenma, but also the local people felt relieved. He agreed with this. She looked around and said that, by the way, it was so lively here, as if she had ended up in an ancient city. He asked, weren't cities in the past different from today's? She said that cities back then were a little more developed. He understood her and said that this city was also quite good. However, the technology of the past was simply amazing. She took his arm with a happy expression and said that, however, for her, the best city is the one where she can walk with her master. They flew here to Hakuryu for a date, right? He denied it and said that today there was an important task. He wanted to make a deal. She didn't understand him, and he asked, Tenma doesn't have connections with the outside world, right? They will try to sell the things she created. Since he also learned alchemy, he wants to sell goods in large quantities. It must have good value. If they can make money on this, it will help the whole village, so they are bound to succeed. She told the master in a cheerful tone that he could definitely handle it. A little later, they came to the building. Deluxe saw the flag and said that they had come to the Klen Chamber of Commerce. He had heard that they were the best in the country. They went inside. He greeted them, and the worker said that he had not seen them before. They should briefly describe why they came here, to buy or to sell. He answered this question and thought that it was immediately obvious that this was the main trading company in the country. He asked what goods they had. He said that he had brought everyday utensils. The worker said, in a disinterested tone, that if it was some kind of junk, then they were not interested. He asked him to wait, put the bag on the counter, and said that he asked to look at this first. This caught his attention, and he said with a smile that as he saw it, he was full of confidence and agreed to look at it. He took out 2 glasses and a lamp from there, began to examine them, and said that these were, of course, rare items. Cindy told Serge to touch the magic stone on the glass. The merchant asked in surprise, "Stone? What kind of magic?" When he did so, a drink instantly appeared in the container. Serge exclaimed in confusion. Water appeared. "What kind of glass is this?" The girl explained that the magic accumulated in the stone was transformed into water. 1 glass of water could be created per hour, and it was drinkable. With these words, she picked up a table lamp and said, "If he turns it on here, light will appear." When she demonstrated it to him, Serge was amazed at how bright it was. He'd never seen anything like it. That's it. He'll buy everything from them. He'll pay 100,000 Peru for the lamp, and for the glass, 50. No, also 100,000 Peru. The protagonist thought with a smile, 100,000 Peru. Depending on the position, the sum could be equivalent to a month's salary. Even more than he imagined. Serge, taking the paper, suggested they conclude the contract quickly. He asked the protagonist his name. He caught himself and replied, yes. He didn't even introduce himself. His name is Diluc Robello. The merchant repeated his name in surprise and exclaimed, "Could it really be that one?" The man immediately bowed and said, "That was incredibly rude." He didn't know he was Mr. Robello. He'd heard of him, but he didn't think he'd come here directly. The MC replied, "No need to worry so much, but right now, He's just the head of a small village. He's just Diluc from Tenma, and he has a favor to ask. With that, he pulled out a map of the area and said he needed the caravans to travel to Tenma and then make their purchases directly from there. Serge looked at the map and thoughtfully noted that the village was quite far away. It would be difficult to pull off, even though he, the Lord, was asking. The protagonist thought the location is very inconvenient. That's understandable, considering the costs and risks, but he could try this. He said it out loud. He'd say it bluntly. There's a lot of land there. Thinking ahead would open up plenty of opportunities. Besides, magic items are crafted in Tenma, and if he buys directly, he won't need a pass. That's beneficial for both of them, right? The merchant replied thoughtfully, that's certainly true, but rumor has it they kidnap people there. The protagonist smiled, showed him the document, and said, they've sorted that out. Here's a letter of thanks from the police. Serge, shocked by this, exclaimed, they got rid of them? After thinking for a moment, he said, okay, next time, he'll send his own group there. His allies smiled at him. The merchant extended his hand to the MC and said he'll be waiting. The protagonist, shaking his hand, thanked him and remarked, it's a great deal. They shook hands and parted ways. Sometime later, on the way home, the protagonist said that it seemed they had reached their destination, so their flight wasn't in vain. He petted the dragon and thanked it. Hakuryu replied, you're welcome, MC declared. Now Tenma has a source of income. Life will be easier this way. They'll make the village better. The villagers watched their flight. When the allies landed, Kumarin exclaimed, the master has returned. Bearman, with a child on his shoulders, said, thank you for your hard work. The protagonist also thanked the builders and noted that they'd already built a house. They were so fast. Dovato replied, it's just an ordinary shack. The protagonist, looking at the well-built large house, asked in surprise, a shack? He wouldn't call it that. Dovato was embarrassed and said, he flatters them. I want him to be pleased. MC smiled at the builders. Kumarin added, they won't lose to those thieves again. When they work, they also train. The guy carrying the box remarked, they're reliable. The protagonist asked in surprise, do they work together? Thank them very much. The guy replied, they're just helping. People used to be afraid of the beastmen, the girl added, but now they rely on them. Kumarin replied in surprise, I see. He felt like he was in a dream. He didn't have enough words to thank the protagonist. MC countered, he should be thanking them. Thank him. After a while, he looked around and thought, the village has come to life. But something needs to be done about these fields. Leticia greeted him. He exclaimed, it's her. She was holding a vessel of water, and she was watering the field directly from it. He asked in confusion, where does this water come from? She pointed him in the direction and replied, it's from a nearby stream. She collects it there and waters the fields. The protagonist asked in surprise, and she's constantly running back and forth with this jug? The girl, confused by his reaction, replied, yes. The protagonist looked at Cindy and noted that there wasn't much he could do with the pitcher. The village population had increased, and farming required a lot of water, so using the pitcher was inefficient. He activated the status window, opened the alchemy skill, and the system informed him that he could create various items in exchange. He exclaimed, exactly. His alchemy level had increased. Cindy, looking at the screen, happily noted that he was already at level 3. He could now use much more magical energy. He replied, yes, and now he'll try it. MC activated the alchemical transformation toward the stream. The ground opened, and water from the spring gushed through the channel, reaching right to the fields and beyond. Leticia's mouth dropped open in amazement. Cindy clenched her fists in glee and exclaimed, it's a water channel. The protagonist smiled and replied, well done. Cindy said, it's simply amazing. Leticia noted in amazement, the ground here is solid, yet he was able to create a water channel. Thank him so much. MC replied, no need. But he was curious about something. There's not enough water from the stream. Did they used to live on the water from this source? Leticia said, yes, but there used to be more. But recently the flow has sharply decreased. He repeated thoughtfully, there's less water. Armed with a notebook and pen, he took a few notes and said, there haven't been any changes in the climate here, so the problem lies with the water source. Maybe something happened in the forest? I'll have to check. Meanwhile, monsters came to the source of the stream and began greedily drinking the water. After a while, the protagonist, peering into the distance, said there was still a long way to go. Kumarin warned him to be careful. Dangerous monsters live in these parts. Perhaps they have something to do with all this. He replied, it's worth checking anyway, but let everyone be on guard. The builders agreed with him. Kumarin declared he must return to the village in one piece. The protagonist asked in surprise, must? The builder replied, otherwise he wouldn't be able to look Cindy in the eye. She told him, he understands what will happen to him if something happens to the master, right? The MC replied sheepishly, I see. Let him forgive him for that. And in his research, he'd like him to do some heavy lifting. With these words, he showed his allies a fishing net. The builders stared at it in surprise and Kumarin asked, what's it for? The protagonist explained, it's made for catching boars, and weights made of magical stones were attached to the corners. When prey gets caught in it, the trap will snap shut. If a person gets caught in it, they simply need to touch the stones to free themselves. You could say it's an automatic capture net with a safety system. Kumarin, picking it up, admiringly remarked, Excellent idea. We need to install this quickly. The protagonist remarked that if they could get at least a little food this way, the villagers wouldn't have to go into the mountains. They should move on for now. The builders agreed, and the allies moved on. After a while, the aura in the space changed. Kumaran noted with surprise that there was an increasing miasma. He turned to MC and said he had one request. If monsters appeared, let them fight. They were noticeably stronger than humans, but even so, they were captured by bandits. He saved them, and they wanted to show him their true strength. The protagonist looked at them earnestly and replied, fine, but as a lord, he couldn't stand by and watch his villagers put themselves in danger. Could he direct them during the battle? Kumaran exclaimed, of course. Thank him very much. Then, as if on cue, a roar rang out, and a monster appeared from behind the thicket. The protagonist stared at the enemy in surprise, then shouted, Cerberus, enemy. Turning to Kumaran, he ordered them to surround him first, one with him. The builders readily responded to his order. When his allies complied, MC thought that the Cerberus's 3 heads gave it a wider field of view. First, he needed to disorient it in close combat. Kumaran shouted at the enemy, he'll show him the fury of a bear. With these words, he grabbed one of the monster's heads by the neck and began to tear it apart. The protagonist remarked, excellent, but we mustn't let our guard down. He shouted at his ally to throw him. Kumaran followed his instructions precisely and tossed the Cerberus away. The enemy roared and tried to rise, but Kumaran leaped at him and impaled him with his pike. The protagonist, looking at the dead monster, said, they won. The builder said it was all thanks to him. He praised them. Well done, they did well. It's only a short distance to the water source. They'll keep up the good work. The allies cheered. After a while, when they reached the spot, MC, looking at a small waterfall blocked by a large boulder, said, this is the source of the water in the mountains. He could even see the bottom of the pond. If all this water got to the village, it would be absolutely magnificent. But this huge boulder was blocking the flow. Kumaran offered to break it and asked to do it, but when he approached the boulder, the allies were surprised to see it moving. The builder exclaimed in amazement, this isn't a stone. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise, it's a stone golem. When the monster rose to its full height, the allies were stunned by its size. The protagonist told the builders to throw large rocks at it. The bearman remarked in bewilderment, but what will that do to him? Kumaran sternly replied, they will do as the master says. They started throwing rocks at the enemy, but it was all in vain. Kumaran exclaimed, it didn't work. MC, drawing his sword, replied, everything is fine. He activated the Robello style and charged the golem. He noticed the monster's knee. A stone shard was visible at the joint. He thought if he used that stone as a wedge, he could stop it. He should aim there. The protagonist summoned a full moon flame slash and struck the enemy's knee. His leg instantly broke off. The protagonist thought, that's not bad, but if it keeps falling apart, it'll fill the entire pond. Then he should do this. MC summoned Hakuryu, and the dragon immediately appeared before his master. He jumped onto his familiar's back and, pulling the enemy aside, again used the Robello style, summoning a crushing sword. After that, he struck the monster in the stomach, and a magical object leaped out of its body. The protagonist chopped the monster into pieces and pulled the object out with the tip of his sword. The builders watched in amazement. The protagonist, picking it up, said, a magic stone. This was what was helping the golem move. Kumaran exclaimed in admiration, well done. The golem crumbled to dust. He replied, they helped a lot too. And thank you, Hakuryu. Well, the problem is solved. Now the water should return to the village. He must return quickly. He wants to see the happy faces of the villagers. At that moment, in the royal capital, Octo came to the king and said, His Majesty called him. The ruler, looking at him gloomily, said, he knows why he called him, right? To talk about how he works. The boy turned pale with fear. The king gloomily continued, after losing his previous assistant, he appointed him to this position. And what exactly is his job? It's unacceptable for monsters to invade the palace. The knights still trained were exterminating demons. And yet, at that moment, he was informed that he stood there like a statue. He was far worse than his previous assistant. His reputation in the palace couldn't be worse. He may be the son of Duke Higgins, but such behavior is unacceptable. And so he is suspended from work for a month. Octo, confused, asked again, a month? The king replied that he should change his attitude during the allotted time. The boy objected, but it wasn't his fault. The ruler was indignant. Enough talk. Now he can go. It hurts him to look at him. Octo looked at him sheepishly, apologized, and left the throne room. Slamming the door, he cursed and strode out with an irritated expression. He remembered how the king's assistant had recently told him that Mr. Deluc finished his business in the morning. Could he fill out a document like the protagonist? Everyone was whispering behind his back that the protagonist was better. He thought angrily, this idiot always gets in his way. Well, he'll show him. At that moment, the king, sighing regretfully, said that he had heard that Octo was also talented, but to think that he had simply stolen MC's achievements using his position. Compared to him, the protagonist was magnificent. He even thought that there was someone who understood him. That was why he was so surprised by the news that he was planning a rebellion. This information had come from Higgins' son, and he couldn't ignore it. Under the pretext of demotion, he had pushed the protagonist aside. In fact, deep down in his heart, he was wondering what if a rebellion really happened. He was simply afraid. MC had talent, popularity, popularity and the ability to manage people. He had everything. In other words, he had the qualities of a true ruler. Looking into the glass, he asked the protagonist to forgive him, a weak king. Exiling him was his big mistake. After a while, Leticia exclaimed in delight, looking at the glass. How much water? Can you drink that much? She thanked MC for such joy. He replied, yes, she could drink as much as she wanted. The girl, pouring soda into the jug, noted that he even made a well. It was the first time she had seen a structure of such a shape. The protagonist said it was all Cindy's alchemy. At that moment, Kumaran turned to her and said he wanted to tell her about their lord's exploits. She asked in great detail. The protagonist laughed, thinking that water was essential for agricultural life, so this should improve the lives of the people in the village. Suddenly, a system sound was heard. He noted the sound of the skill panel. Cindy exclaimed, he earned experience points. MC replied, I think so. After checking the information, he exclaimed, already 1,000 points. Now he can summon another spirit. The girl excitedly said, let him do it quickly. The protagonist exclaimed, who will appear? He couldn't wait. Extending his hand, he called upon an ancient spirit to pass through time and appear before him. Then, he cast the ancient summon. A magical vortex appeared in space, and a dark-haired girl appeared. The protagonist noticed in surprise, she? He thought they had gone into the forest to find the cause of the water shortage, and there they had defeated the stone golem that was blocking the free flow. Thus, they had restored the water to the village. Then, he accumulated experience points and summoned a new spirit through the ancient summon. Please summon some beauty female chef, not someone's ancient granny. And there she stood before him, Alice. The girl suddenly caught herself, gasped, and in a voice stammering with excitement, said, she's glad to meet him. He smiled and said, no need to be nervous, he's Deluc. Spirit mangled her name in a fluster and said it with annoyance. She'd messed it up again. MC said he was very glad to meet her, but Alice, terribly embarrassed, gasped and covered her face with her hands. Cindy told him Alice was shy. He replied, yes, it was noticeable. The girl continued, but she's an excellent spirit and a great cook. The protagonist asked in surprise, cooks? What do you mean? Her skill is cooking. Alice sheepishly replied, yes, her special skill is cooking. He thought in amazement, she's a chef. Cindy complained that as soon as she thought about food, she immediately wanted to eat. She turned to the girl and asked her to demonstrate her skills. She led her to the kitchen and said there were kitchen utensils here. She created them using alchemy. She could use them freely. Alice busily gathered her hair into a bun and said, well, get to business. Her work began to boil. She kept chanting, the ingredients are ready, the food's heated up, another pot. Okay, everything's just perfect. Cindy watched her work in admiration. The protagonist noted with surprise how she changed so much when she cooked. Finally, Alice announced with a smile, it's ready. Everything turned out well. Grilled wild boar meat, boar cheeks stewed in cream, wheat noodles, and chicken broth. He, looking at the prepared dishes, said in amazement, wow, it looks delicious. But isn't that too much for 3 people? Alice immediately became embarrassed and replied, please forgive me. She got too carried away. He laughed and said, everything is fine. They really have a festive table. After that, he offered to feed the villagers too. Alice quickly set the table, and the villagers began to take their seats. After a while, when everyone had tasted the dishes, Kumaran exclaimed in delight how delicious it was. He'd never eaten such tender meat before. Cindy admitted it was simply delicious. Kumaran asked the spirits, her name is Alice, isn't it? She could open her own restaurant. The girl was embarrassed by his praise and modestly replied, she used to own a cafeteria. He pointed out, who would have doubted it? MC, tucking into his food, agreed, yes, it was very delicious. Alice replied, she was glad he liked it. The protagonist said, it's the first time I've eaten such a dish. It's simply incredible. The girl said, it's all because there were so many good ingredients. Boar meat has a strong odor, making it difficult to cook. But since the meat is fresh, if you drain the blood properly, it can be cooked. Thanks to Cindy's freezer, the vegetables stayed fresh. There's usually a lot of scale, but if you carefully remove it, it mixes with the chicken broth, giving it an excellent flavor. He replied, I understand. She really loves to cook. Alice said sheepishly, yes. A short time later, all the plates were empty. The protagonist thanked the spirits, adding that he felt like he had more energy after eating. Cindy remarked, so did she. Alice modestly said, it must be her skills effect. MC thought, I see. Summoning a new spirit grants it its abilities. He activated the system screen, and indeed, he had gained the cooking skill. This allowed him to increase his magical power after eating the food he prepared. It also increased his resistance to magical attacks. He wondered out loud, increases magical power and increases resistance to magical attacks? Alice said with a smile, her skill is creating food that increases resistance to magical attacks. Resistance to certain magical attacks varies depending on the flavor. For example, spicy food increases resistance to fire, while salty food increases resistance to air, and the increase doesn't depend on how tasty the food is. The protagonist, surprised, clarified, so the food increases magical damage and adds resistance, but he wouldn't be able to cook as deliciously as she did. Alice smiled and said he could leave the cooking to her. If she could make him so happy, she would be only too happy. He laughed and thanked her. After some time, Alice came out to the fields and thought she had a strange feeling, as if she had traveled back 4,000 years. I need to see what products are available in the current era. As she walked deeper into the fields, a plant caught her interest. Leaning towards it, the girl exclaimed in surprise, It's rice, the protagonist asked in surprise. Rice? What is that? Alice stared at him in bewilderment and asked, he doesn't know what rice is? He nodded his head in bewilderment and remarked, that grass? They thought it was just a weed. She was indignant. It's a wonderful product and very tasty. MC couldn't understand her delight. Delicious? This grass? Alice noted, you could even make sake from it. It's a truly versatile product, he thought in bewilderment. Universal? The village is having problems with agriculture. He asked out loud, can she grow it? The girl replied, yes, it grows very well. It seems like there's suitable soil here. The protagonist was interested. Could she tell him how to grow it? Alice smiled and said, of course. He clarified, but is it really edible? Maybe he'll even like it if he grows it. After a while, Alice prepared a dish from this grain. Everyone was delighted with the taste. Some more time passed, and the protagonist came to the fields with Cindy. The girl said that Alice had fit in so well with the village. He agreed, and there was no arguing. He hadn't known rice was so delicious. Cindy exclaimed, she has the most delicious food. The protagonist dreamily said that if they could grow rice, the food problem would be solved. Besides, the village needs more money. In the future, he plans to sell more magic items. Cindy asked if he had already encountered that trading company. He agreed and added that since then he had been trying to find a way to mass-produce magic items, so he consulted with the dwarves. A representative of the trading company would arrive today. The girl happily said, that's great. Then they should go to the workshop. After a while, they arrived at the right place and knocked on the door. Devoto greeted them cheerfully. The protagonist immediately apologized for the intrusion. The dwarf replied that they were on break, so he shouldn't worry. Cindy was surprised to note that this place was new. Devoto said with a smile that the dwarves' construction skills were top-notch. They finished it a few days ago and also prepared magical items. The girl picked up one of the items and exclaimed in admiration, wow, it's exactly like the ones she creates. MC smiled and remarked, no difference. Now they wouldn't have any problems with trading, and he would give him a reward. The dwarf was delighted. The protagonist added that he was glad he'd consulted him. The dwarf happily responded, thanks for letting me dismantle such a beautiful item. And they created the blueprint, so there was a possibility of mass production. Deluxe said he'd then ask the villagers who had time to help with it. Could he lead production? Devoto happily agreed, adding that they'd finished something else. The dwarf produced a magical artifact, at which point the protagonist exclaimed, is this what he asked for? Cindy, perplexed, asked, what is it? Devoto explained that this bracelet allows one to store magical energy. It acts as a reservoir. They made it from the core of the golem he defeated. The protagonist happily noted that thanks to this thing, they don't have to worry about wasting magical energy. Cindy exclaimed, it's a wonderful item. Because he's gaining more and more skills, she needs to use her magic more efficiently. He replied, that's why he asked the dwarves to do it. Even though he asked them to help with the production of magical items, they even did that. The girl happily said, let her put the bracelet on him. Putting it on? MC said in surprise that he could feel the magical energy being absorbed. Devoto told him to squeeze it at the right moment, and the energy would be released. Cindy admiringly said that it suited him very well. She would like one too. The dwarf noted that they had made another one of the same shape. However, it was only a replica and could not store energy. But these bracelets were still very similar. She turned to her master and sheepishly asked if he could put it on her. Devoto anticipated her wish and putting it on, asked what size it was. The girl exclaimed in confusion. She wanted her master to put it on her. What was he not clear about? The dwarf apologized, noting that he hadn't thought of it. The protagonist said that it really did suit her. He turned to Devoto and asked if he had more bracelets like that. He wanted to give this to Hakuryu and Alice. Cindy, hearing this, asked in horror, but she thought she was the only one who would wear it. The protagonist replied that he would feel uncomfortable if they were upset. She resigned herself to it and noted with a smile that he was just that kind of person, which is why she loved him. The dwarf said with a smile that he would adjust the sizes and bring them to him. Diluc thanked him and said that a caravan should be arriving any minute. This would be their first time here, and they should go out and greet them. After some time, the allies stood outside for a long time. Cindy yawned and said that they were late. The MC looked worriedly at his watch and asked if something had happened on the way. He summoned Hakuryu and said that they needed to explore the surroundings. Having climbed onto the dragon, they took off into the air and began patrolling the area. Suddenly, Cindy called out to him, pointed in the direction, and said, there's a wagon over there. The protagonist immediately lowered the dragon to the ground and asked the merchant, what's wrong? Serge frantically tried to answer, when suddenly a blade approached his neck. The protagonist immediately armed himself and shouted, who is he? Let him get out of the carriage. Octo then climbed out, mockingly exclaiming, he's come to see him. He's the king's confidant. Cindy asked in confusion, who is he? He replied that it was, as the idiot had said, the king's confidant, Octo Higgins. He was the one who got him exiled. The protagonist irritably asked, what is he doing here? Serge explained that he'd attacked him on the way to the merchant's place. The young man angrily shouted at the merchant to shut up. Serge hiccuped in fear. Octo turned to his rival and said he had come to him with a pretty good offer. He, the rebel, had been forgiven, so let him return to the capital. He'd heard rumors that he was living here with filthy beastmen. If he became his subordinate, he'd live in the capital again, and he'd allow him to participate in politics. Cindy called out to her ally warily. The protagonist pointed his sword at him, and told him to go away. He wasn't going to become his pawn. From now on, he was the lord of Tenma village. Remember that. Akto grabbed Surge and, holding his blade to his neck, exclaimed, "Does he really think he has a choice? If he refuses, this merchant is finished, so he better answer quickly." Suddenly, Hakuryu flew up to him and told the boy she'd heard everything from the sky. She snatched the merchant from the scoundrel's grasp, pushed him to a safe distance, and declared that she wouldn't let the matter rest there. The merchant thanked his savior. Hakuryu replied, "What's he talking about? The main thing is that he's safe." Akto nervously asked, "What kind of monster is this? Is it a new kind of demon?" MC replied, "She's not a demon, but his friend, and she appeared with his skill." He exclaimed in bewilderment. His useless skill never worked. He's an unworthy child from a poor family. He can call as many friends as he wants, but he'll still be small fry. He can't do anything alone. The protagonist, smiling, armed himself, coated his sword in flames, and replied, "Perhaps. He relies heavily on his friends, but summoning is his skill." The scoundrel exclaimed in confusion, "Flame? What kind of magic is this?" Diluc dashed toward him with lightning speed and attacked, causing Akto to fall to the ground. MC summoned an alchemical transformation and noted that it would bind him. Instantly, the boy was captured by roots sprouting from the ground. Akto didn't understand what was happening. The protagonist said that the Higgins family would soon begin searching for him and come for him. The protagonist approached the others, apologized to them, and said that they needed to hurry to the village. Surge, confused, agreed. Cindy admiringly remarked that he was so cool. She would always be with him. He sheepishly thanked her and said that the cart was damaged, so they needed to fix it and go to town. The girl exclaimed, "Let him leave it to her." She immediately rushed to the cart and began fixing it with magic. MC thoughtfully drawled, "Why is Akto here?" He didn't think the king would give him time off. Suddenly, a royal rider galloped up to them on horseback. He noticed the coat of arms and, confused, asked what he was doing here. The guy clarified, "He's Lord Diluc. He was ordered to find Lord Akto by the king's orders." The protagonist replied that the man he was looking for was tied up for attacking a civilian. The rider excitedly said that he had escaped from the mansion. And now this, the scoundrel looked at the messenger in confusion. He approached him and said that he had received orders to take him back to the capital. He had a letter for him. Akto took the message and read, "Effective today, he would be dismissed from his position as the king's assistant. The suspension period had been extended for another 2 months, and the punishment would be handed down later." He shouted in bewilderment and anger. Dismissal and punishment? His father wouldn't approve. The royal rider replied that they had received the duke's approval. He had written confirmation, so he asked him to refrain from resistance. MC, observing the situation, told the messenger he would entrust the rest to him. The guy thanked him. At that moment, Cindy reported that she had finished the repairs. He thanked her and added that they would now head back. Surge was already mounted on Hakuryu. Suddenly, Akto called out angrily, telling him not to think this was the end. The protagonist ignored him and approached Hakuryu. Akto fell to the ground and cursed with hatred. A month later, in Tenma village, Surge came to the protagonist and greeted them. Upon seeing the merchant, he noticed that the wound on his face had already healed. The young man smiled and said, "It's all thanks to him." He was glad that after that incident, he had strengthened the area's security. The MC apologized in advance if he involved him in something like that again. The merchant exclaimed, "He has good news. Those magic items sold out in a flash." Service requests for magic tools are also increasing. The protagonist enthusiastically exclaimed, "That's great. It would be wasteful if they had to buy a new one every time it breaks." Surge said with satisfaction, he can't believe he, the young master, has turned maintenance into a business. Thanks to him, they're doing great. He hopes he'll continue to work with them. MC asked with a smile if he'd like a snack before the long journey. After a while, Alice set the table. Surge, looking at his plate, said in surprise that he'd never seen such a dish before. The protagonist noted that their best chef in Tenma had prepared it. The girl sheepishly replied, "It's a special pilaf. This special of the day is made with deer meat, rice, and spices. The rice for the pilaf is cooked with a small amount of water to make it fluffy, and they added freshly picked carrots, which are grilled with oil." Surge asked in surprise, "Rice?" He tried the dish and exclaimed in admiration that it was delicious. "Why is this rice so delicious?" The protagonist smiled and remarked that all the ingredients were grown on their land. The guy asked if he could sell it to their trading company. This dish was incredibly delicious. The protagonist replied that he wouldn't mind, but in exchange they would sell it, indicating the place of production. He wanted to make a brand out of it. After that, they struck a deal. Sometime later, Surge came to the farm and was surprised to notice that it was more lively than last time. Before, this place looked like an abandoned village, and many different races lived here. "The master really has talent." MC replied that it wasn't all thanks to him. Everyone in the village helps him, but Tenma's development has only just begun. He too can't wait to see the future of this village. Meanwhile, in the neighboring town of Rosas, the residents were discussing the latest news among themselves. One guy asked his friend if he'd heard news about the neighboring lands. They'd recently started developing. The friend remarked in bewilderment, their land was poor. How did they do that? The guy explained that it was all because of their lord. They, too, would soon have a new lord. It would be great to be like Tenma village. Sometime later, Surge arrived in Tenma and informed the protagonist that this shipment had also been accepted. As always, thanks to him, he has both vegetables and an excellent reputation. He's amazed at his talent. The protagonist sheepishly thanked him. The The merchant added, by the way, that he'd heard rumors that their territory had expanded. MC replied, yes, recently. Thanks to King Getha's persuasion, the territory he controlled had expanded significantly. This was because there was no one else in the area who could act as a ruler, and because Tenma was steadily regulated. Surge asked, where had his influence extended? He replied, the forest and water territories had expanded, right up to the small town of Rosas. The merchant remarked in surprise, Rosas then? The protagonist asked in confusion, what's wrong? Surge replied, he overheard a conversation a few days ago. Acto became the mayor of the town. The protagonist, confused, asked, this guy? The merchant remarked that he thought it wouldn't be a problem for him, but just in case, he warned him. Well then, he bids him farewell until next time. MC said goodbye and pondered the news. Aristocrats exiled from the central part of the country are often sent to the villages. Duke Higgins probably thought this might be an opportunity for him to change his attitude towards him. If Octo were to make any moves again, Tenma could be in danger. When Cindy learned this news, her indignation knew no bounds. She asked irritably, Octo is the lord of a neighboring town? Can she give him a spanking? He tried to calm her down and said it wasn't all that bad. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. The protagonist opened a map of the area, pointed out the location, and noted that the current territory adjoined Rosas through the forest. There was nothing wrong with being cautious. They were currently guarded by a bear tribe, but they couldn't cope with the increased territory. Even if they were attacked, he wanted to be prepared. He considered traveling through the new territory. He turned to Dovato and remarked that while he was gone, he would rely on him and Cindy, but the girl objected, saying she was coming with him. The protagonist smiled and said, then it's time for them to go. She responded happily. After a while, the allies dismounted, and MC noted that there wasn't much miasma here, but there were plenty of monsters. They could easily hide if Acto attacked. They needed to set traps, just in case. The allies set about this, laying nets, snares, and other devices. When they finished, Cindy sat down on the grass and remarked, the forest is so huge, it was simply impossible. The protagonist noted that this territory stretched all the way to the sea. They wouldn't have enough time or energy to do so. Suddenly, a notification sounded. He looked at the system screen and joyfully exclaimed, he'd accumulated experience points. Perhaps this was due to his success in selling magical tools and expanding his territory. It would be nice to have a spirit with defensive skills and knowledge. Cindy exclaimed in anticipation. She couldn't wait. He smiled and remarked that he agreed with her. Having chosen a suitable location, the protagonist began chanting a spell, calling upon an ancient spirit to pass through time and appear before him. He then activated the summoning of the ancients. At that very moment, a blonde-haired young woman appeared before them. She rose from her knees, smiled, and said it was an honor to be summoned. Her name was Carrot Sandy. MC replied that he was pleased to meet her, thank her for answering his summoning. She waved her hand around and asked, what is this? He replied, this is Tenma, 4,000 years later. Carrot exclaimed in surprise, 4,000 years? So this is the future? She hopes she'll be useful. They shook hands, and the protagonist said he was counting on her. The girl smiled back and reciprocated. Cindy happily told the girl they hadn't seen in a while. Carrot smiled and remarked that she was as energetic as always. Cindy said she was just in time. The protagonist repeated, puzzled, just in time? Then he remembered and said with a smile, exactly. What about her ability? Carrot was about to answer his question, but at that moment, a growl was heard, and MC exclaimed, drawing his sword. Monsters. They were surrounded. Assessing the situation, he noted there were so many of them. What should they do? Carrot turned to him and said, leave it to her. She drew a large magic hammer and shouted at the enemies. If they were going to attack, let them all do it together. The girl eagerly joined the battle, and very quickly all the monsters were destroyed. Magic waves appeared in the air above the forest. The protagonist, confused, asked, what just happened? Suddenly, monsters began crawling out from everywhere, eagerly crawling toward Carrot, as if drawn to her. She stood in the center of the clearing, smiling. The protagonist gasped in surprise. Wow! All at once. Carrot, still smiling, remarked, well done. Her ability is trap creation. Using magic, she instantly creates this. When creating it, she recreates the magical structure of the traps she once studied. She also uses vision-blocking magic so no one will notice the trap, he remarked in surprise. So that's why he didn't see anything at first. The girl laughed and replied that, as a hunter, it was great praise that he hadn't noticed. They won't be able to determine this until he fully understands how it works. MC grabbed her hands and exclaimed in admiration, incredible, a perfect ability for defense. Carrot asked in confusion, what does he want to protect? The protagonist explained that he was the lord of these lands, and they were slowly falling apart. Their territory had recently expanded. He wanted to be prepared for attacks from monsters and outsiders. The girl smiled and replied, then she's perfect for this. Cindy added, that's for sure. Carrot is an amazing person. In ancient times, she built a palace in Tenma. He was surprised by this and asked, she built it? The girl became embarrassed and replied, she didn't do anything like that. Cindy laughed and remarked, she's just shy. Carrot countered with a smile. But she was the royal alchemist, creating magical items for the royal family. They even called her the alchemist from Tenma. The protagonist spoke with confusion. Is that true? He didn't know that. Cindy replied modestly, thinking it wasn't cute at all. Ancient Tenma was already a thing of the past. In ancient times, this settlement was ruled by a king, and people created their own culture. Everyone lived in peace. Speaking of the palace, it was of great importance. The Tenma Palace was its symbol and center of defense. Because it was well guarded, Tenma developed peacefully. The surprised MC understood. The palace was the center of defense. It was built in ancient times to protect people's lives. Culture and civilization developed in this palace. He asked if that structure could be recreated. Cindy stared at him in confusion. What did he mean? He explained that their village needed defensive power now. If they could recreate the ancient palace, he thought they could make Tenma even better. He wanted to see that civilization with his own eyes. With these words, he reached into his bag and pulled out a map of the area. Carrot asked, "Is this the current Tenma?" The protagonist replied, "Yes." The landscape itself hadn't changed much. The girl exclaimed, she took part in the construction. The plan would need to be adjusted to the current situation, but she could recreate it. Cindy exclaimed happily, "She'll help too. They could do it." MC thanked his spirits and suggested they start building the palace. Meanwhile, in Rosas, one of the merchants exclaimed in bewilderment, "They stopped trading agricultural products? What's the matter?" The woman who broke the news replied, "It's a message from the new lord. Only merchant guilds officially recognized by the king himself are allowed to trade in the city." The man, confused, remarked, "How can this be?" Two other residents, upon seeing the information about the tax increase, were also horrified. One of them exclaimed, "How much longer can this go on? Ever since that bastard Octo showed up here, everything went down the drain." His friends scolded him, telling him to keep his voice down. They might hear him. The boy exclaimed, "What's wrong with this town?" At that moment, Octo's assistant reported to him that information about trade regulations and tax increases had been presented to the residents. Things were going well here. He raised his glass of wine and thought maliciously, "Now he rules this town, and then he'll do the same in that village too." At that moment, Kumaran and his comrade approached the protagonist and reported that they were finished with the patrol. He thanked them. Kumaran remarked that it had become much safer here. The protagonist remarked that it was all thanks to the walls and water channels. Carrot's security measures had made Tenma safer. The girl remarked that with her ability, such things were easy. MC winced at her unexpected appearance. He wondered if her ability was to create traps. She created them with her magic. Carrot was a master of traps and an excellent builder in ancient times. The girl, as if reading his thoughts, said they would soon be able to begin construction of the palace. The protagonist noted that recreating it was their current task. Kumaran said building alone was difficult. They would also help. Carrot happily remarked that indeed, the more people, the better. He assured her they could definitely handle the heavy work. The girl thanked him. The protagonist thought about it. The bears are their warriors now, and besides guarding the village, they also train for battle. They take on a lot. An idea occurred to him, and he suggested that his allies summon a new spirit using his skill. It would be better if they had more workers. He activated the status screen, looked at the information, and said, "I just need to save up a little more. Today he will give it his all, and then he will be able to summon." Carrot, perplexed, asked, "Is there really such a rush?" MC smiled and replied, "Not so fast perhaps. He simply wanted to do his best for this village." The girl said with a smile, "He's a wonderful lord." After some time, the protagonist began actively helping with village affairs and practicing creating magical items. Finally, a system notification sounded. After reviewing the information, he exclaimed, "He's accumulated." With these words, he stood more comfortably and extended his hand. The bear man exclaimed with admiration, "The lord is summoning someone." Kumaran added, "This is the first time he's seen such a thing with his own eyes." The protagonist asked, "Who will appear now?" He activated the summoning of the ancients again. A pillar of light began to emanate from the ground, and a gray-haired elderly man appeared among it. He asked why he, Bollock, had been summoned. MC stared at him in surprise and then said, "It's nice to meet you." He was about to say his name, but he had to block a sharp attack from the summoned spirit. Bollock chuckled approvingly and said he noticed his attack. Kumaran exclaimed in bewilderment, "Who is this old man?" Bearman asked in confusion. "He just attacked their leader." Balak told the protagonist he wasn't going to listen to a weakling. If he wanted him to submit, he'd have to show him his strength. The protagonist cautiously noted, "Strength then." The old man said they would duel. MC, surprised by his proposal, replied, "Fine, he accepts the challenge." Balak declared, "I admire his courage. He could attack however he wanted." With these words, the old man thrust his sword forward to block, and the protagonist admired his incredible aura. He hadn't looked at his skill, but it was as if he had gained more strength. Bollock was surprised. He had already mastered the use of chi. That was the benefit of possessing the summoning skill. He thought in astonishment, chi, he'd never heard of it before. Even though it was thanks to skill, getting praised by an old grumpy master from the Miram is quite an achievement. The difference in their combat experience was enormous. If he didn't give it his all, he would lose. The bears watched the situation tensely. The protagonist thought, he can't lose. With these thoughts, he rushed at his opponent. Bollock barely managed to block his blow and was surprised to see that the boy's chi had increased again. He was utterly astonished by this. MC, noticing his brief hesitation, decided to attack now. He activated the Rebello style, summoned Star Shadow Slash and attacked the opponent. The blow was so powerful that Balak, though he tried to parry the attack, couldn't withstand it and dropped the sword knocked out of his hands. Afterwards, he exclaimed admiringly, "Excellent." He lost to the young master. With these words, he knelt before him. The protagonist asked him not to do this and to rise from his knees. Balak admitted that his chi had been amazing in battle. He asked, "What is that?" The old man replied, "After all, it hasn't remained in my memory to this day. Simply put, it's a different training method, different from magical power. Anyone can master chi. It comes with improved physical abilities." The protagonist noted in surprise, "So that's what that surge of strength was." Bullet continued, "But his chi was different. It was persistent chi." He asked, puzzled, "What's that?" Spirit said that refined chi is divided into persistent and soft. For fighting monsters, persistent chi is needed, and for subjugating them, soft chi. In their battle, he had definitely felt persistent chi. As far as he remembered, the great berserker swordsman who had become a legend possessed such chi. MC thought in amazement, "A great berserker swordsman." The old man added that he had been his student in the past, and his strength had surpassed him. He didn't expect to meet someone like him after so many years. The protagonist scratched his head and sheepishly replied, "I don't even know if I can match such an amazing man." Balak remarked, "He's just as humble. He could command him in battle." With these words, the old man bowed politely to his young master. A surprised Kumaran approached him and asked, "Isn't this Balak? Please, can he teach them this martial art?" The protagonist looked at the bears in surprise. Kumaran added, "He said anyone can master chi if they train. They may not achieve stable chi, but they want to help their master." Balak remarked in surprise, "Bears, in his time they were strong warriors, but they're weak." MC stood up for his allies and said he was asking for them too. The old man grabbed his chin and declared, "If his young master asks, he can't refuse." Turning to Kumaran, he warned him that his training was rigorous. The boy happily thanked him. The protagonist watched them with a smile. Carrot approached them and said, "Balak has arrived." The protagonist addressed her by name in surprise. The girl winked conspiratorially and said, "It seems he's taken up training and he needs to build a palace soon." He smiled and remarked, "She'll excuse him. His assistants have dwindled, but they will help in any way they can." Carrot replied, "Everything is fine. Let him rely on her. She can't wait for strong warriors to defend the palace she'll build." MC said, "Yes, he'll be looking forward to it too." A few days later, on the coastal territory of Tenma, Balak began training the bears. He taught them, practicing their strikes. Chi is born in a strong body. They need to move faster, even faster. The protagonist smiled and said, "Everyone's trying so hard." Balak remarked with surprise, "He's patrolling here too?" He replied, "Their territory has expanded, so he decided to check." The old man replied, "I see. He'd done a good job. His training was fine, so he needn't worry and continue his patrol." Turning to the bears, he shouted, "Another 100 passes." The protagonist laughed and remarked, "Yes, indeed, then he'll move on." Balak asked him to be careful on the way. He promised him that. Continuing his patrol, MC thought about keeping an eye out for monsters. Also, there are a lot of bandits in the coastal areas. The rest of the country's influence doesn't extend as far as Tenma, so they're staying here. Putting his hand on the hilt of his sword, he decided he needed to be careful. After some time on his way, he came to the sea and breathed in the moist sea air with pleasure. He thought, "The sea, how beautiful." He looked around, noticed the wooden platforms, and noted with surprise, "Is that a harbor?" Having descended, the protagonist walked along the wooden structure and, astonished, noticed a boat behind the rock. Suddenly, sea pirates blocked his path and pointed their weapons at him. The leader of them, Dodoria, asked, "Who the hell is he?" The protagonist, surprised, stated his name and added that he was the new lord of these lands. "And who are they?" The boy exclaimed in bewilderment, "A lord? So his influence doesn't extend to the sea. His work is no easy task. They are a gang of pirates called the Pterodactyls, and they live here." MC thought in surprise, "Pirates?" Dodoria looked at him tensely and warned him not to make a move. The pirate threatened him with his weapon, and the protagonist intercepted it with one hand. The pirate was indignant. "What is he doing?" The protagonist gripped the weapon, and it snapped in half. Dodoria, confused, noted that he had broken his weapon with his bare hands. His comrade angrily attacked MC, shouting, "Take that." But the protagonist grabbed the pirate's wrist with one hand, squeezing it so hard that his hand loosened and the weapon fell. The guy cursed and looked at his hand in surprise. Dodoria irritably called the protagonist a miserable bureaucrat and, pointing his sword at him, shouted, "Stop getting in the way." He drew his sword and knocked the weapon out of his hands with a light swing. Dodoria didn't understand what was happening. His comrade, perplexed, asked what they should do. If they were caught, they would definitely be returned to the city. The captain replied, "Don't panic." He turned to the protagonist and asked, "Do you want to destroy the quiet place they've always sought?" MC thought, "There's no way to reason with them." The pirate grabbed his sword again and continued, but he wouldn't let him. The protagonist noted that a battle was inevitable. He activated his physical enhancement and rose into space. Dodoria, shocked, exclaimed, "He flew up." The protagonist used the Rebello style, summoned the Midnight Sword Dance, and prepared to attack. Dodoria narrowed his eyes at the powerful aura and exclaimed, "What's going on?" MC thought. Now. He extended his hand and called out to Hakuryu. At that moment, a dragon appeared before him and asked, "Did the master call him?" He jumped on top of his familiar and looked down at the pirates. Their mouths dropped open in astonishment. Dodoria, turning pale, muttered, "A real dragon? They really exist." Sighing, the boy admitted they couldn't defeat the dragon. He fell to his knees to the surprised gaze of his comrades. The protagonist, confused, remarked, Are they giving up? He dismounted the dragon, approached Dodoria, and asked if they could tell him about their intentions. After a while, they settled comfortably on the pier, and Dodoria began his story. He said they became pirates. It all started with an escape from the city. There, the aristocrats forced them to work tirelessly, beating them for every little thing. Some were even forced to fight for money. They fled the city, away from such a life. After long wanderings, they arrived at the sea, and were finally able to live without a care in the world. The sea became their home. The protagonist wondered in surprise, why didn't they want to return to the city? He asked him out loud why he lowered his sword when he saw Hakuryu. The guy answered sheepishly, simply that when they were still toiling in the city, an acquaintance of theirs told them stories about dragons. They were fascinated by them. A legendary era, when dragons lived, there was peace and tranquility without hunger or discrimination. The protagonist thought in confusion, a legendary era. That's Tenma in the past. Dodoria continued. They set out to sea, desiring freedom and tranquility, and the dragon became a symbol of that. But those are just fairy tales. There's no such thing as peace in life. They survived by stealing from the rich. MC thought, so they were oppressed too. The guy added, it was their revenge for all the humiliation they suffered. The protagonist said, but that doesn't change the essence. They still stole. They won't get away with it. Dodoria remarked how stubborn he was. They'll get away with anything. The protagonist stood up and asked then, if they were willing to make a deal with Tenma? The pirate stared at him in bewilderment and asked again, a deal? He replied that he would like to hire them for his village. He needed their hard work and knowledge of the sea. In exchange, he would guarantee them money and housing. Dodoria noted with confusion that they could certainly help with information about the sea, but why would he even need that? MC smiled and said that if they were serious, then they shared the same dream. The boy, surprised, asked, just a dream? The protagonist said the legendary era they'd spoken of existed in Tenma, and he was trying to revive it. Dodoria looked at him as if he were crazy and asked, revival? Was that even possible? The protagonist looked at him carefully and said that with his skill he could summon ancient creatures, and with them he wanted to bring back that era. So, would they help him? With these words, he extended his hand to the pirate. Dodoria, surprised, thought he hadn't shown it to them, but merely offered to cooperate. They'd only been oppressed before. And yet, he'd extended his hand. He looked at him with a smile, and as he stood up, he noticed he'd said his name was Deluk. Shaking hands, the pirate asked if he'd let them help him. Seeing the confusion on his face, the boy chuckled and added, a little brazenly, they want to see that era too. They shook hands, and the protagonist replied with a smile, he's counting on them. A deal was struck. After some time, the former pirates began returning the stolen items. As promised, they shared information about the sea, safety precautions, and fish. The information proved very useful. And then, they provided the village with a real ship. The protagonist gasped in surprise at what he saw, and asked, is this a ship for Tenma? Dodoria replied, yes it is. A Tenma fishing vessel lay before them. The protagonist glanced at the flag logo fluttering in the wind, and confused, noticed that it was the Robello family crest, a crescent moon, and a dragon. When did they even have time? Thank them so much. The guy rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment and replied, you can't even hang a pirate flag. Alice exclaimed in admiration. Just think of all the things they could catch. It's just incredible, MC said. He suggests they catch them right away. Dodoria readily responded, he'll lower the gangway now. After a while, the allies enjoyed the scene. The protagonist exclaimed, what a wonderful wind. All his allies were thrilled to be sailing on the ship. Dodoria and his comrades skillfully unfurled the sails in the vessel, and the captain exclaimed, they're off. As the ship set sail, everyone present cheered joyfully. Everyone was in complete awe. Dodoria looked at Cindy and Alice and asked his comrade, are those girls ancient spirits? His friend replied, it seems so. He summons incredible people. His skill is no joke. Cindy approached them, apologized, and asked if they were going fishing in the open sea. The captain replied, yes, but due to the weather, it would be better to sail a little further. The girl laughed and thanked them. Dodoria sheepishly said, no need to be polite to criminals like them. The girl smiled and replied, she'd heard they'd gotten better. The boy grew even more embarrassed and said, they're just not used to being treated as equals. Cindy laughed and said kindly, they'll get used to it quickly in Tenma. Alice smiled, standing next to her. The girl continued, their master's goal is to create a place where everyone is happy. Everyone, without exception. The former pirates looked at them in confusion. She suggested they catch lots of fish and make the people of Tenma happy. After that, she approached the protagonist and asked if he felt anything. He replied that it wasn't much different from hunting monsters. Closing his eyes, he paused and said, there are lots of fish here. The girl exclaimed, wonderful. Dovato approached them and announced that the magic tool was ready. Cindy thanked him, spread it out on the deck and said, this is her special magic net. It closes automatically when a fish gets caught in it. She made it even bigger so she could catch lots of fish. The protagonist exclaimed delightedly, wow, thank her so much. She playfully replied, anything for him, but we need to use this quickly. Turning around, Cindy asked Alice in surprise, is she there yet? As she cast her net into the sea, she said, apologizing that she could wait no longer. Cindy remarked that when it came to food, she became obsessed. She should let her help. Alice agreed and said she hoped they would be able to catch a lot of fish. Suddenly, MC became wary, wondering if this was a feeling. Suddenly, he exclaimed, wait. Alice, surprised, noticed that sound. Looking overboard, she was even more surprised. The net was torn. Cindy, too, looked at it in bewilderment. The protagonist said there was definitely something under the ship. Dodoria exclaimed in horror. What is it? Could it really be a sea monster? A huge aquatic monster surfaced, looked at those standing on the ship, bared its sharp teeth viciously, and growled menacingly. The protagonist looked at it in amazement. He thought he had previously headed to the shore, which had become their territory. There, he was surrounded by a crew of pirates led by Dodoria. However, their dreams of an ancient civilization turned out to be similar, so they decided to cooperate for the future of Tenma. Afterwards, they received a ship from the pirates, which became their fishing vessel. Then they went out to sea to catch fish. Cindy, looking worried, called out to the master, and he looked down and asked, "Is that a sea monster?" The creature that emerged from the water let out a loud howl, which caused waves to rise, rocking the ship. Dodoria, looking worried, called out loudly to the master and said that it was the sea monster Todosur. He had heard that it destroyed ships with its horn. Diluc, with a worried expression, thought that they needed to quickly get away from the ship. A battle in the middle of the sea would definitely damage the ship. He loudly called out to Hakuryu, and she appeared in the air above the ship. The pirates looked at her in admiration and said that this was the very same dragon. He jumped high into the air, caught her paw, and they began to fly away. Cindy, looking worried, loudly called out to the master and asked what he was up to. They flew further away from the ship, and he loudly called out to Todosur, distracting his attention from the ship. He said loudly that he would deal with it. She, looking worried, said that he was distracting his attention from the ship. He thought that this way he could take it further away. He called out to Hakuryu and asked if she could descend straight to him. She agreed. They began to descend towards this monster, and he swung his sword. She closely watched what was happening, noticed that he was not using magic, and wanted to ask something about it. He thought with a confident smile that it was true. This was the same chi. He directed this energy at Todosur. He was engulfed in this energy, and everyone watched what was happening with a worried look. Immediately after that, the monster bowed its head before him and stopped being hostile. He made a joyful sound, and everyone immediately calmed down. Hakuryu said that he used soft chi. It was wonderful. The protagonist sheathed his sword, patted him on the head, and said that next time he should try not to do such a thing. He returned to the ship. Cindy hugged him, and with a worried look said that the master should not frighten her anymore. He apologized and said that he did not have time to explain. Dodoria approached him and said that he was very surprised. He subdued Todosur, called the Lord of the Sea, so easily. He said that it was all chi, an ability from the ancient Tenma. Gimli said that he heard about it from the teacher. He is definitely not an ordinary person. Alice, with a joyful expression, praised him, and Cindy, with displeasure, loudly said that those were her words. Dovada was standing nearby and said that, by the way, she had already restored the net. He thanked them and said that then they could start fishing. Everyone happily agreed. And after that, they caught a huge pile of fish, which they were very happy about. After a successful fishing trip, they returned to the harbor and looked at their catch with admiration. She said with a very happy look that they now have so much seafood and she can cook so many things. It's all thanks to their knowledge of the sea. Her magic tool is also wonderful. One of the former pirates pointed at the large fish hanging by their tails and asked if this huge fish could even be eaten. She was shocked by what she heard, walked up to them and indignantly asked loudly, "People in this era don't eat tuna." They were worried about her reaction and said that he had never tried it either. She clenched her hands into fists and asked how they could not know this incredible taste. She wants them to know how valuable it is. She will cook it for them. She immediately took out her knife and began to cut the fish with a joyful smile. MC watched her cook with admiration, and Cindy stood nearby and said that she was turning out to be skilled with seafood too. She finished cooking and said happily that she was grateful for their weight. He looked at it with admiration and said that it looked delicious. She stood nearby and said that it was cut so beautifully and the smell brought back memories. Alice, with a happy expression on her face, said that so much came out after cutting. He said that he knew something like this would happen. Well then, they will have lunch here today. Everyone started gathering at the table, and she, with a happy expression on her face, said that they should eat until they were full. He wished them bon appetit, tried the dish, and admiringly said how delicious it was. Who knew such juicy fish existed? She said that if you use her skill, any fish becomes very tasty. To enjoy the taste of the ingredients, it is better to eat sashimi with salt. After all, it was the master who made the salt. He said he simply used his alchemy skill. She sat next to him, eating with a satisfied look, and said that it was no wonder it was so delicious. He looked back, noticed that the former pirates were standing to the side, approached them and said that they should also dine with them. Dodoria refused and asked with a worried look if it was okay for them to be here at all. He didn't have time to finish because Diluc immediately agreed and said that they were all born at different times. Besides, they were also different species. However, in Tenma, everyone is equal and eats at the common table. They can go sit, her food is very tasty. They hesitantly approached the table, began to eat, and he thanked them for the food. When they tried her dishes, tears of happiness flowed from their eyes, and he said that it was so delicious, much better than stolen food. They had only recently met, but he was already so happy to see them. He poured him a drink and said that he was happy too. It wasn't just him, someone else wanted to greet them. He called out to Hakuryu, who landed on the deck, and the former pirates immediately approached her. They climbed onto her back to go for a ride, and they were happy about it. A few days later, development of the port began on the Tenma coast. He said that they also needed to fix the pier. Dodoria, looking a little worried, said that he apologized for such a botched job. He looked around and said that there were a lot of trees and rocks here. They should consult Carrot about safety. He noticed something moving in the bushes and thought that, however, he didn't sense any magic at all. He turned to the others and said that someone was hiding in the grass. He approached the bush where he noticed movement and saw someone's tail. A girl emerged from behind the bush, looking worried, calling him Rose's henchman and telling him that he shouldn't come any closer. He looked at her with a surprised expression and wanted to ask something about her. She, with a displeased expression, began to transform her hand into a beast's and angrily said that they had made it this far. Dodoria looked at her and said with surprise that she had transformed her hand. He had only seen such a thing once. The protagonist looked at her and said that she was a half-human and had the characteristics of a dog. She, with an angry expression on her face, again angrily called him Rose's henchman and said that he should not talk about her abilities. This name caught his attention, and Cindy said that this was that town nearby. He agreed and said that something must have happened. He turned to the girl and asked if she could tell him more. He introduced himself and said that he was the lord of Tenma village and that the crest on the ship was different. He did not have time to finish because the girl loudly said that he should shut up. They, humans, are their enemies, and she won't forget how they burned down her house. He was surprised by what he heard and asked what happened in Rosas. She turned away and said with malice in her voice that she wasn't going to talk to humans. Lord Hakuro would decide. She quickly ran away, and he, with a thoughtful look, said that he wondered what she meant. He thought that Lord Rosas was now Octo. It was dangerous to ignore something like this. He said that he wanted to know more about what was happening in the neighborhood of Tenma. He needed to follow her and find out everything. She said that she would also go with him. Dodoria said that they couldn't leave it like that. They should fight back against Rosas. He denied it and said that there was no need to give them a reason to attack. Now they were just going on reconnaissance. He remembered the girl's words and thought that it looked like the situation was not simple. He said that they were heading into the forest. They agreed, after which they flew on Hakuryu's back. Cindy asked where their people lived. He looked around and said that they lived in the White Wolf Forest. It is located in both Tenma and Rosa's territories. Since this land is not governed by a country, many demi-humans live there. He was surprised when he saw a burnt forest and said that they were approaching the Tenma border. They asked with shocked looks, what was that? They were all worried because they saw a large area of the forest burned down and a girl standing in the middle of a completely destroyed village. She turned to them and asked, "It's them again. Were they really chasing her?" MC apologized and said they just wanted to know what happened here. She said it wasn't the people of Rosas. They wanted to know what happened here and what people had done to her people. It all happened after Lord Rosas changed. Initially, there were few demons in the White Wolf Forest, as many demi-humans lived in peace and tranquility in the area. However, one day, people from Rosas came with money and food and said the following: if they obey Lord Acto, they will keep their territories and lives. They understand what will happen if they refuse, right? Her father, the head of the settlement, agreed, and that's when all hell broke loose. People started grabbing the villagers and said they had to give them men for their factories and women for their warriors. They also had to pay tribute every week. Octo loudly said that from now on, he was the king and god here. Now they have no freedom of religion. They must get rid of the dog statues, otherwise it's the end for them. The villagers were worried about this and said that, however, Lord Hakuro had always guided them. How is this possible? The king stepped forward, knelt down, and said that he was asking that at least this be left. At the present time, the girl clenched her fists in anger, pointed to the place, and said loudly that, however, they still burned everything. Could he tell her what they had done to people? What had her parents done to them? Diluc asked, looking a little worried. Where her parents were now, she calmed down a little and said in a dissatisfied tone that she didn't even know if they were safe or not. Shortly before the incident, she had been taken to Rosas. Besides, her friends had also disappeared without a trace. He thought with a serious expression that everything was that bad. He didn't think about people's lives at all, but simply followed his desires. This is very typical of him. Now Acto is capable of any cruelty. He cannot be allowed to continue like this. He needs to save these people. He asked if they could go with them to Tenma. The girl was indignant at this and asked loudly, he wants them to go to the human village? He thinks she will trust him. Unexpectedly for her, he said in a calm tone that she might not trust him. She herself should understand that there are a lot of wounded here, and it is dangerous for them to stay here. She wanted to object with a confused look, but an old man lying nearby called her by name, Kororo. She ran up to him with a worried look and called her grandfather, and he said that this young man was right. They are already at their limit. This young man can help them. They can move to Tenma. She collected food for them alone and ran through their territory looking for a quiet place. She tried very hard. She started to cry because of his words, and he said that now they need to put pride aside and live. She decided to listen to her grandfather's words, turned to them and said that she would accept his offer. However, they can't trust them. She doesn't beg for help, but she can't lie anymore. He said that he understands her. However, it's a little different. Akto drove him out of the house, so he understands her anger and sadness. He just wants them to live. She was surprised by what she heard and agreed with a confused tone. After some time, they reached the village and she asked if this was Tenma village. She looked to the side and said with a little surprise that there was a bear man and a dwarf there, which means that demi-humans live here too. Cindy approached her and with a friendly look said that everyone here cooperates and lives together. The protagonist confirmed this and said that here they are free in faith and culture. Kororo took out a small statue and asked, "Does that mean Lord Hakuro too?" He agreed, looked at the statue in her hands and it caught his attention. She said with a sad expression that it was the only one left, but it was pretty cracked. He noticed how important it was to her and thought that this figurine was a symbol of their pride. He asked if she didn't mind, maybe she could let him fix it. She was surprised by what she heard and asked if he could really do that. Cindy agreed and said that she could just give it to the master. She doubted it, but still decided to trust and handed the figurine to him. He took it in his hands, used alchemical transformation, and restored this figurine. She was very surprised by what happened. Tears of happiness began to flow, and she called it their pride. She began to wipe away her tears, and he handed the figurine back and said that for now, they could only give this, but they would definitely help them. She tried to calm down, but still couldn't hold back her tears. Taking the statue back, she called him sir and thanked him. The villagers began to communicate with the new arrivals, and MC stood aside and thought that they had helped these people. But the main problem was not yet solved. He would definitely stop Akto's tyranny. After some time, he entered the house and wished everyone present good morning. The villagers turned to him with happy faces and wished him good morning in return. He said with a smile that he saw that they were now in good spirits. He thought that several days had already passed since their arrival. They were slowly getting used to life in Tenma. He approached the girl and asked how the wound on her arm was. She said with a happy expression that thanks to his potion, she felt much better. He said that he was glad to hear it. By the way, where is Kororo now? She wanted to answer this question, but he looked around and noticed a tail sticking out from around the corner. He came closer, looked out and saw that she was praying in front of the statue and told the great Hakuro that she was asking for her parents' protection. He thought that even though they were here now, it didn't change the fact that they had lost their home and loved ones. He wanted to help her parents. He clenched his hand into a fist and thought with a serious expression that he had no choice. A little later, they gathered in one hall at a table. They all looked intently at him, and Diluc said that frankly, he was going to fight Rosas, or more precisely, Akto. Carrot raised her hand and asked, would they attack them from here? Bullock asked, wasn't that dangerous? He turned to them and said that he understood the risk. However, her parents were captured and the situation could change quickly. Kororo was surprised by this and asked, was he willing to risk the village for them? He said that sooner or later a clash was inevitable. If they didn't stop Akto now, he would repay them in kind. Besides, he can't forgive those who harm the residents of Tenma. His duty is to protect all the villagers. Therefore, he won't allow him to harm them again. They looked at him with smiles and silently, and Carrot said that if the leader says so, then she has nothing against it. Cindy said that as a summoned spirit, she will definitely help. But not only for that reason. The master has always protected Tenma, and she was a witness to it. Therefore, they will succeed this time too. The others also agreed and said that they will help them, just as the master helped them once. Hakuryu said that they should not forget about her either. He laughed and thanked her with a smile. He called Kororo and said that they decided everything. She said with a small smile that all right, she will join them too. He thanked them all and said that now they must develop a strategy. Dodoria asked what they will do. They can't just attack after all. He said that invading territory from here is associated with a high risk, so he would like to avoid it. She said that the problem here is that they did not cross the border. Originally, their village was located between the territories of Tenma and Rosas. They were the ones who initiated the arson. He said that a village in their territory was also burned. They will most likely blame it on a natural fire. The protagonist, with a serious expression, thought that they tried not to intrude into Rosa's territory. Akto certainly does not know about the border and territories. Maybe someone told him? Carrot said that if they could attack from the other side. Bollock said that their opponents think the same way. These words caught his attention, and he said that indeed, then it would be good to have a good reason. In this plan, everyone's strength will be needed. Sometime later, in the forest of the White Wolf, on the border territory, she called the master and said that they were finished with the preparations. He praised them, and she said that all the animals nearby had moved away. Cindy, with a happy expression on her face, said that her skill was amazing. He called Hakuryu and asked what the situation was. She flew above and said that there was no one nearby. They could start at any moment. He drew his sword, got into a fighting stance, and used magic power release. She loudly exclaimed in surprise how much accumulated magic was in the bracelet. He swung the sword and released a powerful stream of energy that left a large crevice in the forest. He turned around and said that, from now on, he was relying on her. She, with a happy expression on her face, said that she would not let him down. She used the alchemical transformation skill and he thought, great, everything is going according to plan. Several soldiers ran up to them and loudly asked what that sound was. Were they enemies? They ran up to him and loudly asked what he was doing in Rosas's territory. He was finished. If he was planning to attack, he should introduce himself immediately. MC introduced himself with a calm smile. Honestly, they should have realized from his smile that they had fallen for his scam plan. They were surprised by what they heard and said that the Lord had attacked them. They should be ready for their revenge. A soldier attacked him, hit him with a spear, but he blocked the blow. He asked with a smirk, what were they even talking about? They were the ones who would face their revenge. They looked down and asked, wait, isn't there fresh earth under their feet? Girls came out of the forest and Cindy said that they understood everything correctly. This road was just created for Tenma. They were surprised by what they heard, turned around, and she said that the right path to the territory lies behind those trees. They camouflaged the real border with trees and grass and they crossed the border. Basically, they broke into Tenma territory. They were surprised by this, and one of them thought he hadn't noticed in the darkness, but there was a plan. He said with a determined smile that there was nothing to be done. Reinforcements would arrive soon, responding to the sound. At that moment, they heard soldiers ask, didn't the sound come from here? They agreed, emerged from the forest, and a soldier with a spear loudly said that their soldiers were outnumbered, and they had already lost. He called out to Carrot with a calm expression, and she understood him, took out her hammer, and joyfully said that it was good when everything went according to plan. She struck the ground with her hammer, creating traps under their feet, which immediately activated. They cried out in pain and realized that they couldn't release the traps. She calmly said that they could calm down. It wasn't a death trap. Cindy happily praised her, but she became a little embarrassed and said there was no need to praise her. Diluc thanked them and said they could now return to Tenma. He asked Kororo to help, and she began to transform, saying that was why she came. She fully transformed and said they could climb onto her back. They were surprised by this and said that she could transform like that. They climbed onto her back, and she said they should hold on tight. He turned to them and said that he was asking them to protect the village. She agreed, then ran back. Cindy turned to the master, wished him luck with a determined expression, and thought that they would also do their duty. He remained standing in front of the soldiers and said that her traps would soon disappear. If they wanted to escape, they could. He did not want senseless bloodshed. As soon as the traps disappeared, some of the soldiers immediately began to retreat. But there were also those who said that he would not escape, so he could try to attack. He used the Robello style, slashing the moon ship, and with a swing of his sword, released a powerful stream of energy. He defeated a squad of soldiers with this one attack and said that it seemed that there were fewer willing ones. The soldiers who fell to the ground from his attack said that he was too strong. Where did he get so much strength? He looked at the sky and thought that dusk had fallen. The night guard soldiers could no longer move. Those who escaped most likely called for reinforcements. More trained fighters would come next. His hand began to tremble and he said that he had expended too much energy. Right, he had food from Alice for situations like this. He remembered how she had said earlier that she was not very useful in battle, but at least her food would help them. He ate it and thought that his magic had already been restored. He was grateful to her. He got into a fighting stance and thought that even if they attacked, he would definitely defend the village. That was his plan. He would take the reinforcements. A man came out of the forest and said that he was so strong. He adjusted his glasses and asked with a sly grin if he could fight him too. The protagonist wanted to ask something, but he interrupted him and said that he had to show what he was capable of. The soldiers rose to their feet, started running away, called for Lord Dultrin, and said that this guy from Tenma clearly couldn't handle him. He looked at him with a wary look and thought that he was sure that he was definitely the leader from Rosas. He looked at him with a smirk and said that his lord had told him about him. He said that he wanted to repay him for what he had done. That was complete nonsense. He smirked with a slightly tense look and said that he did not mince words when talking about his lord. He laughed at his words and said that Acto, of course, has money and land, but lacks brains. He does everything he tells him. He wonders why this is so. Is it so that he can continue living like this? He will lend him a helping hand. He jumped back when the enemy swung his weapon and thought that he had a morning star. He should be more careful. He said with a smirk that it was a good reaction, but it was not that simple. He tore the glove off his right hand and said loudly that he had not yet seen him really fight. He thought with a serious expression that he had skill. The sounds of approaching footsteps caught his attention and he asked, he can hear it, right? There they are, the sounds of his defeat. MC, with a wary look, wondered if the sounds were coming from the forest. However, he did not feel the intent to kill and did not understand what this feeling was. Demi-humans emerged from the forest, holding weapons in their hands. He was surprised by what he saw, and Dultrin, with a smirk, called them his trash and said that it was time for them to serve their master. They began to tremble with a frightened look, and he thought that there were demi-humans and even elves here. as Kororo said. He remembered how earlier at the meeting she said that many species live in Rosas. Many of them are demi-humans, and she is afraid that they will be brainwashed. She herself does not understand the purpose of all this. Currently, he looked at them and thought that the capital of the demi-humans had captured Rosas. One of them, with horror in his eyes, said that he did not want to fight, but his body did not obey at all. He asked if he controlled them with a skill. They agreed and said that such a skill was also very rare. He pulled the hand of one of them and said that these bracelets do not allow them to resist his will, while depriving them of their will. Here they are, his beloved people. Will he be able to kill them? Diluc gripped the sword in his hand and said that he oppressed people for his own gain, just like Acto. Energy coursed through his body, and with a serious expression, he said he could not forgive those who treated their people like objects. As Lord Tenma, he would defeat him. Doltrin pushed the demi-human away and said he could say whatever he wanted. He gave them the order to attack, telling them to surround him and attack. He put the sword aside and with a serious expression said that he was skilled in more than just swordsmanship. He had used alchemical transformation on the trees nearby and thought they were in the forest, so he would have enough material. He looked at him with a displeased expression and said he had used a skill. He thought that, however, he couldn't handle that many. He simply wouldn't have time to tie everyone up. He was already at his limit and was unable to attack. He laughed and ordered the archers to open fire. They fired, but he used the Robello style, Moon Shadow Cleave, and deflected the attack. He ordered another shot and thought he was using an offensive technique to defend himself. He called it useless, used alchemical transformation, and created an earthen wall in front of the archers. He noticed the protagonist running from the side and thought he was attacking from a blind spot. He pretended that this attack made him tense, but unexpectedly for him, he smirked and said it was a joke. He dragged the man to him, put him in front of him, and used him as a human shield. He stopped, and Doltrin laughed and asked, "He can't attack, right? Even such a decrepit old man can be used." He became very angry about this, and the other demi-humans called the leader and said that it was dangerous. This caught his attention and he said that it turns out he is Kororo's father. He asked, "Are they acquainted? What luck is this? If he doesn't want him to get hurt, he better not move. The time has come, his warriors should head to Tenma. He can go after them. He doesn't want his village to be destroyed, does he?" He thought warily that he could send Hakuryu, but if he thinks about it, he has an idea. He laughed with a confident look and said that he could abandon the old man and return to Tenma. He can't save everyone. His weakness is that he can't abandon anyone. However, he said with a calm expression that he hasn't lost yet. He said with a confident look that he only knows how to talk. MC said that he knew that Tenma would be attacked. His task is to stop it. He listed the names of his comrades and said that they will all protect Tenma. His comrades are strong and he believes in them. However, the leader heard his daughter's name, came to his senses and asked if his daughter was okay. He stood in front of him and said that she was safe. He promised her that he would bring them all back. Doltrin chuckled and said that it was so presumptuous. They will be his shield until they die. The spikes on the bracelet dug into the village chief's hand, and he screamed loudly in pain. He had some kind of guess and said that he would definitely save them so that they could live happily together with Kororo. That's why he asks to trust him. He got into a fighting stance with a serious look, and he looked at this with a wide grin and asked, did he still decide to leave his people? He quickly ran towards him, swung his sword and directed his energy there. The village chief listened to his words and raised his hand with the bracelet. He struck the bracelet with his energy, destroyed it, and he was surprised because of this and asked loudly, did he destroy his bracelet? How did he even have strength left? The leader immediately ran to the side and struck the commander with his sword. The leader fell to the ground and the worried villagers asked how he was feeling. They looked to the side and asked, however, why did the bracelet break? He said with a wide grin that he didn't expect that he was able to remove his soul control. Now they know about his skill. Diluc looked at him and thought that he was protecting his ring. Through the ring, he controls the hearts of people who wear the bracelet and strengthens his control over them. If the control is removed, the bracelet's power will also decrease. But he can't do this to everyone. His ring needs to be destroyed. Doltrin began to smirk and waved his weapon and said loudly that he told them the battle with him wouldn't be easy. He raised it above his head and began to wave it above his head, and he watched it and thought that he had a lot of magic since he was able to control so many people. He turned out to be more dangerous than he thought. He watched him closely, called out to him loudly, and said that the fun was just beginning. At the same time, in the middle of the forest, the girls saw a crowd of half-humans with weapons. And Carrot said that it was surprising. There were quite a few of them. They all joined the battle, and Balak said that there were more of them than expected. Gimli snatched their weapons and said that all these warriors were being controlled. Dodoria knocked out these warriors with punches and said that it was difficult to fight without harming them. Dovato approached the unconscious boy, examined his hand, and said that they appeared to be magical bracelets. He would try to destroy them while they were unconscious. He thought with a serious expression, what a strange skill this was, and its owner was probably the same. He stood nearby and asked how many of them were there. Is the master alright, right? Balak said that of course, there was no need to worry about the young master. Dodoria said that they would protect the village he entrusted to them. At the same time, in the mountainous region of Tenma, Cindy used alchemical transformation, restraining a couple of warriors and knocking their weapons out of their hands. Carrot praised her, and she said she was able to immobilize them. She turned her back and said that they still shouldn't let their guard down. She agreed and said that more and more of them were coming from the forest. Kororo said that there were many beastmen among them, but something was wrong with them. Cindy said that it seemed they were being controlled. She sensed magic from their bracelets. She thought that if they destroyed it, they might be able to free the demi-humans. Carrot blocked their attacks and said that it would be difficult to defeat them, one by one. She used alchemy to restrain several more of them and said that such a thing was unnecessary. The user of the skill is currently fighting the master, so they need to choose a time before he defeats him. She turned to her with a smile and said that it was indeed so. She said with a slightly wary look that she could only hold back a few warriors. She said that her traps wouldn't catch everyone either, if only there was more time. Kororo said loudly that she would handle holding back the warriors, and they should prepare their skills. She raised her hammer above her head, thanked her, and said that she would not let their plan fail. She created a magic circle and said that she would not let that happen either. They both said confidently that they would hold out until the master won. At the same time, in the border territory, Doltrin asked if he should give up already. Tenma would soon belong to them anyway. He swung his morning star and destroyed trees a few meters away from him. And the protagonist looked at this and thought about how large his area of attack was. He reflected his attack, and the morning star flew over the heads of the chained people. He noticed this and thought that if he was careless, he would hit them. He attacked again and said loudly that he could not win by dodging. He ran towards him, waiting for the right moment, and thought that he needed to knock the morning star out of his hands. He needed to close the distance. He was about to strike, but unexpectedly for him, he stopped this attack, pushing the blade of his sword with his foot. He looked at him with an arrogant smirk and said that this was a bit of a weak attack. He tried to hit him with his weapon from behind, but he noticed it and jumped back from him. He looked at him with a displeased expression and asked, "Does he think he can win without wounding or killing anyone? He will not do anything just to achieve something. It's time to end this. Here is his defeat." He attacked the chained people, and he immediately ran to him and loudly said that he should not touch them. He stopped his morning star with his sword and said that all he knows is how to use pathetic tricks. As he said, his fighting style is a bit weak. However, he has friends who are ready to help. He was confused because of this, and he opened the system window and thought that he had finally accumulated enough points. He trusts his strength. Earlier, back in the village, Gimli called the master and asked if he had heard about the plan. Was he really going to fight alone? MC turned to him, called him by name, but Dodoria approached them and said that he should not worry. The master could always summon Hakuryu. He said that was not entirely true. He would not summon her near the border. They were confused because of this, and he said that her summoning consumes magical energy, but he would like to save it. He also needs her to help him after the battle. He asked with a confused look, so he was really going to fight alone? At this point, he was starting to worry. He opened the system window and said that he had a backup. He saved up more points for the summoning while they were developing a plan. He would also quickly gain points for the summoning itself and summon a new spirit. He said with a worried look that, however, he himself did not know which spirit would be summoned. He had a candidate, and he said that Hakuryu once said, "A militant spirit will answer his call as soon as it smells the scent of battle." In the present time, he held his hand out in front of him and said, "Ancient spirit, he asks to come through time and appear before him. He asks to answer his call of the ancients." At that moment, a tiger appeared next to him, loudly saying that it was his turn. He had waited so long. He glanced at Doltrin and was shocked by what had happened. Diluc opened the system window and it said, "Fierce Beast King of the first level. He receives the incredible power of the legendary beast, the Red Tiger." He called this tiger, and he called him brother and asked, "Is this the enemy they need to defeat?" He agreed with a smile and said that he apologized for being so sudden, but he was asking for help. He confidently said that it was no problem. He could climb on his back. He struck with his morning star and loudly said that he had called another friend. At that moment, the tiger quickly galloped towards him, but he remained calm and thought that, however, he would not be able to keep up with its attacks. Unexpectedly for him, the tiger caught the chain with its teeth, pressed the morning star to the ground with its paw, and said in a serious tone that he had better not interfere with his brother. He jumped towards him, swung his sword, and with a serious expression said that the moment of reckoning had come. He flew close to him and used the Robello style, Moonshadow Cleave, and delivered a precise blow to him. From this blow, he fell to the ground and lost consciousness, and he took a deep breath, looking at him. He used alchemical transformation and bound his body with roots. The tiger approached him and said that he was kind for stopping his bleeding. He said that he needed to suffer a real punishment, just in case he would destroy his ring. He directed the roots to his ring and destroyed it. Doltrin came to his senses because of what happened, began to tremble because of what happened, lowered his head and said that his plan had failed. The heir to eternal darkness will be reborn because of him. He did not understand what he was talking about, and the tiger said that this was all nonsense. He should not listen to him. The protagonist turned to him, agreed, and said that they needed to focus on the pressing matter. He looked up with a worried look and wondered how the others were now. At the same time, Cindy, with a surprised expression, asked them to stop and noticed that the warriors had stopped. They looked around with a confused expression and said that he could move on his own. His body was finally obeying, and they were now free. They rejoiced at what had happened and said that this meant the master had won. She joyfully thought that he was a wonderful person, chosen by the skill itself. The summoning of the ancients is given only to those worthy of being king. On that day, they became spirits and waited 4,000 years. They waited for the one who would possess this skill. The master breathed life into her again. She remembers the happiness when they created things together. She was disappearing from ancient Tenma and from people's memories. However, he has the qualities of a true king, so he will be able to restore Tenma to its former glory. For the master's goal to be achieved, she too will make every effort. First, the demi-humans must be freed. Carrot heard something that caught her attention, called out to her, and said that something strange was happening in the forest. She heard it too, and her attention was drawn to the voice she heard. At the same time, the freed people went to MC and said that he defeated Dultron and his skill was dispelled. Now they are free and can move. He is their savior. Also, his tiger is just incredible too. He said with a smile that he is glad that they are all safe. Kororo's father approached him and said that he asks to accept his gratitude. He took his hand and said that he is their savior. Now he can be reunited with his daughter. Finally, the confrontation is over. However, one of the freed people was still very angry and said that he does not think this is the end. They took their home, their families, from them. They must kill Acto. They both turned to him in surprise. He put his hand on his shoulder and said that he understands his feelings. However, they are currently in no shape at all. They need to get to a safe place, to Tenma. At that moment, they also heard a loud sound, and he worriedly thought that something was wrong in the forest. He summoned Hakuryu. She appeared in front of him and asked if it was her turn. It seemed the plan was undergoing measurements. He agreed and said that he wanted her to tell Cindy and the others about the situation, and take all the demi-humans with her. She should also take the others in the forest to Tenma. It would not be easy, but he really asked her. He turned to the rescued people and said that they all needed to wait out Tenma for a while. They would go with her. He turned, called Akator, and said that he asked to be taken to Rosas. This request caught his attention, and he asked if he had some kind of plan. Diluc climbed onto his back and said that he would explain later. They needed to hurry. He agreed to this, quickly ran in the right direction, and thought that he was relying on his comrades. A little later, Hakuryu flew with the others over the forest, looked down and noticed the rest of her comrades. Carrot noticed her and said that she should look there. It was her after all. She said with a happy look that the master was also all right. She had a message from him. The master wanted her to take the freed demi-humans with her, as well as everyone else who was currently in the forest. Although it would be difficult, he asked them to do this. Kororo asked, "Does this mean the master feels it too?" The freed people started walking, and they said that she experienced that feeling again. Something is approaching here. The very dissatisfied demi-humans raised their weapons and loudly said that they would go to Rosas and destroy Acto. They will never forgive him and will kill him. She looked worried and thought that this was a mutiny of the freed warriors. They called the mistress and said that they should attack him. She thought about it, raised her head, refused in a decisive tone, and said that she forbade them to do so. They were surprised by this and asked loudly if she had forgotten all their anger. She said that she had not forgotten it, but they should not make a mistake. With their anger, they will change the world. Enough of senseless bloodshed. They can change everything. They were surprised by these words and called the mistress with a confused look. She said that she would follow those warriors and stop the rebellion. Hakuryu said that then, she and Cindy would handle support. She would lead everyone to Tenma. Carrot climbed onto her back and wished them luck. She approached the group of demi-humans and said that they needed to temporarily teleport to Tenma. She looked at Kororo's father and guessed who he was. He called his daughter with a worried look, and she said with a smile that he should believe in his daughter. He turned to her with a surprised expression, and she said that everything would be fine with her and the others. She believed in it. At the same time, the protagonist quickly galloped through the forest and said that they would soon arrive in Rosas. Akatora called him brother and asked what he was going to do. He said that the demi-humans' anger towards Acto was enormous. Considering what he had done, this was not surprising. However, what if they killed him? They would be considered villains. He wanted to avoid further conflicts between humans and demi-humans. He also had to pay for his evil deeds. He understood him and said that they needed to hurry. They continued to gallop further and saw the city on the horizon. At the same time, in the lord's estate, a servant opened the door and loudly called for his master. He turned around with a displeased expression and said loudly that he should stop shouting. The guard said loudly that Dultron was defeated by Lord Tenma. He was shocked by what he heard, grabbed him by the collar, and loudly said that he should immediately send reinforcements there. He wanted to object, but he insisted on it. The guard left his office and said that he would do as he was ordered. He called someone a good-for-nothing with a displeased look, heard the sound of the door opening, turned around, and asked loudly, in a displeased tone, "What this time?" He became very worried when he noticed that they were several demi-human servants. He loudly asked how they dared to come to the Lord's holy place. They approached him with very angry faces, and one of them punched him in the face. Octo fell to the ground, wanted to ask something, but they asked what he was going to ask. He shouldn't speak, as if he didn't understand anything. They worked non-stop and were treated like trash. He looked at them and asked loudly, what else should he do with them? They were demi-humans, inferior creatures. They got angry about this, but at that moment MC entered the office and loudly asked them to stop. The demi-humans turned to him, looked at him, and called him Lord Tenma. He called Acto and said that he couldn't get away with everything he had done. He forced the villagers to work and discriminated against the demi-humans. Count Higgins had abandoned him, so he should surrender. He clicked his tongue in displeasure, but his face quickly changed to a smirk. He said that it was not bad. A poor nobleman. He takes in stinking beggars and demi-humans, even though he is trying to develop his territories. Just a little more, and he would have turned the situation to his advantage. As a lord to a lord, he wanted to tell him how to properly use his villagers. Looking at this, I think MC took offense, not because of his words, but because a good-for-nothing fool who has lost everything is trying to lecture him. One of the demi-humans got really angry at what he heard, grabbed him by the shoulder, swung his fist, and loudly told him to shut up. He was about to say something else before he struck, but stopped because Diluc grabbed his arm and stopped the blow. They were both surprised by what happened, and Acto asked why he saved him. However, to their surprise, he said in a serious tone that he was wrong. He was very scared because of this, and the demi-humans looked at him with worried looks. He walked up to the guy he stopped and said that he apologized for grabbing his arm. He didn't want them to be at a disadvantage at the trial. Also, they didn't need to dirty their hands with him, because it wasn't worth it. He got angry about this and said that he was constantly making him look like an idiot. He drew his sword from its sheath and loudly said that he would show him who was worthless here. He was going to kill them all now. He stood between him and the demi-humans and held out his hand to keep them from interfering. He called him by name with a confident air and asked if he wanted to die with them. They warned him of danger with a worried look, but he calmly said that he was not himself. He swung his sword and loudly declared that he would now fulfill his wish and kill him. Everyone began to get nervous about this, but he released a powerful wave of energy, causing his body to freeze in terror, and he dropped his sword. Octo fell to his knees, looked at him in horror, and wondered what had happened to him. His body was not obeying him. He could not withstand this pressure. The demi-humans also felt it, and wondered what kind of power this was. Was he really an ordinary lord? The protagonist stopped using his skill, turned to them with a friendly smile, and asked if they were all safe. They agreed, and he said that he would not be able to move for a while, and that the guards would come here soon. He's finished. These lands will start changing too. That's why he wants to make his crimes public. You might not like that. He didn't get to finish because they said they seemed fine with it. Like he said, they shouldn't get their hands dirty with him. He was glad he managed to stop them in time, looked out the window, and thought he wondered how Tenma was doing. After that, he rode back through the Rosas Mountains, and Akatora said that the Rosas warriors were getting fewer and fewer. He said that while they were advancing here, they managed to defeat almost everyone. Apparently, the mercenaries had already escaped. He asked, so only Acto's accomplices remained? He agreed, and said how much trouble they were. Earlier, he tied him up and asked the demi-humans if they could watch him until the guards arrived. He needed to return to Tenma. One of them asked him to wait and said that they heard him order an attack on Tenma. He may not need the information, but he asks to listen. He sent the Rosas cavalry there. They have very strong warriors, and there are magicians among them. They, along with Acto, robbed the people. For the sake of their own ego and desires, such people will do anything. He must be careful. He apologizes for delaying him. MC said that on the contrary, he was grateful to him for the information. He said with a serious expression that he could entrust the rest to them. They would free the servants and demi-humans. He said with a smile that he was counting on them. One of them scratched his head and said that Tenma was lucky to have a lord. He looked at them with a smile and said that he was only doing what he could, and it did not matter if it was for his domain or Rosas. He would protect their friends in these lands. They thanked him for this, and after that, he went back. Currently, he said that if they did not make it in time, a conflict would break out between the territories. Because of this, no one will know about the crimes Acto and his comrades committed. For the sake of Tenma and the inhabitants, they must stop his troops. Akatora said that then he should speed up. He thanked him and said that they should hurry to Tenma. At the same time, in his village, Cindy brought the freed demi-humans and let them inside. When everyone entered, she looked around and thought that everything seemed to be here. Alice called her, hugged her, and said in a joyful tone that she felt like they hadn't seen each other for a long time. She was very glad that she was safe. She wished it was over already, but judging by the atmosphere, it seemed like it was not over yet. She said with a serious expression that, unfortunately, this was true. Hakuryu flew to them, called the two of them by name, and on her back were Kororo and Carrot, who waved to them. Cindy looked at them with a happy expression and said that as far as she could see, they were perfectly fine. She began to land and said that they needed to discuss the recent events. They gathered together, and she said that it meant they stopped those heading for Rosas. Carrot agreed and said that they were now heading to the village. Hakuryu looked up and said that, however, it felt like someone was approaching. More troops from Rosas were heading here. They needed to protect the village while the master was away. Dodoria asked, however, why this was if the master had defeated the main one in Rosas. She said that they were sent before it was resolved. Apparently, they intended to capture Tenma. He became angry about this and said how dirty they were acting. She agreed and said that the only thing left to do was fight. They should not believe them if they said they lost. Demi-humans approached them and said that they overheard their conversation. They, too, will protect this village and will not allow them to commit atrocities. Kororo looked at them with a smile, agreed, and said that she was counting on them. Kumaran said that he and his friends had been training for this day. Dodoria said with a smile that he would also call his friends. Cindy said that they were joining too. Together they would protect Tenma. At the same time, the Rosas army was heading their way through the forest and said that Tenma would appear soon. He didn't think they would be the ones sent. Caution wouldn't hurt. Also, Lord Acto definitely won't lose. They will capture this small village in an instant. The road begins to narrow. There is an obstacle in their way. What will they do? The commander skied with displeasure and said that those who possess magic should destroy this fence. The rest should dismount and go on foot. He climbed through the fence, and with a displeased expression said that this was already getting annoying. There was so much grass here. He emerged from the forest and was very surprised when he saw a high wall and a group of warriors standing in front. He asked loudly with a shocked expression, "What the hell is this? Where did the fortress come from?" Carrot stood on the wall and said with a wide smile that this was exactly the reaction she expected. She liked it. Cindy stood next to her and said that building a fortress from here was a good idea. They will protect Tenma. The enemy commander pointed at them and loudly said that there were no more than 20 of them. They should attack. She saw this and loudly said that the enemy was advancing. They all should prepare. A crowd of enemy soldiers ran to attack, but they didn't expect that there would be traps in their path, into which they began to fall. She looked at this and said that her traps worked well. The enemy commander loudly said that they should continue the attack. After all, they had the numerical advantage. The demi-humans entered the battle and loudly said that the time had come to take revenge on them. The enemy warrior struck with his sword, but unexpectedly his steel sword broke. He looked at his shield in surprise and said that Tenma's weapon was top-notch. Several warriors ran through the first line of defense, and someone loudly said that they must stop as many enemies as possible. The soldier Rosas ran up to Kumaran and asked in a confident tone, "He fights barehanded?" Apparently, the demi-humans didn't have the brains to handle weapons. However, to his surprise, he easily redirected the blow and knocked the sword out of his hand. He smirked and said that they didn't need weapons, since they had mastered chi. The former pirate stood aside, not fighting, and said that the demi-humans had incredible strength. When will it be their turn? The soldiers noticed them, and loudly said that they should attack these bandits. However, when they got closer, Dodoria immediately attacked them with his large club. Together, they defeated a group of soldiers, and he said that they hadn't raged like this in a long time. The commander stood behind them and asked in a confused tone, "What kind of village is this?" He loudly said that they shouldn't stand still and should move forward. One of the soldiers turned to him and said that they couldn't go any further. He watched what was happening with a tense expression and thought that a squad of mages would be here. Cindy looked to the side and said that the Rosas cavalry was down there. One of the arriving soldiers asked with a confused look, "What's going on here?" The commander turned to them and loudly said that they should hurry and destroy the fortress with magic. They immediately raised their hands and began to use magic, and she loudly said that the enemy was attacking them with magic. At that moment, Hakuryu took off and said that it was time for her to come out. The mages were surprised when they saw her, and she released a powerful stream of flame from her mouth and easily suppressed their magical attack. They were shocked by this and said that their attack had failed. The commander became tense because of this and said that their magic must have a limit. They needed to wear them down. Cindy watched what was happening and said that the enemy army had retreated. Carrot said that they decided to wait until their magic ran out. However, it was useless. Alice came to them and said that she brought food to restore their magic. Later, the commander, with a shocked expression on his face, wondered how this was possible. It didn't look like they were running out of magic. He loudly said that they should move forward and clear the way. The soldiers agreed. One of them ran towards Bellic and shouted loudly. He calmly looked at him and said that he decided to attack without a plan. What a youth. He made a sharp dash forward and delivered a swift blow to the back of his head. The other soldiers were worried about his strength, and the commander loudly called them useless and with a dissatisfied look wondered why they couldn't defeat them. He charged, loudly declaring that nobles like them couldn't lose to demi-humans. Cindy saw this and loudly warned Kororo that she was being attacked from behind. He charged at her with his sword, loudly declaring that they must obey him silently. He stabbed her with his sword, but she transformed into her human form, and the blade of his sword sank into the ground near her head. With a serious expression, she said that even if she died, her friends would inherit her will. Her comrades noticed what was happening and called out to her in a worried tone. The commander swung his sword for another blow, loudly calling her a vile animal and saying that this was her punishment for daring to go against them. Everyone watched this with worried expressions and ran to her aid, but they were too late. However, at the last moment, Diluc ran up to him, used the Robello-style Moon Shadow Cleave, and pushed him away. She was surprised by what had happened and called out to the master in a confused tone. His comrades were glad to see him, and the commander said that he was indeed the lord of these lands. He agreed and said that, as lord, he recommended that they leave immediately. There was no point in fighting anymore. Octo had already been captured. He was shocked by what he heard, rose to his feet, and said in a desperate tone that this could not be. The master had sponsored the army and strengthened it. There was no way weaklings like them could defeat them. This simply couldn't happen. He looked at him with a calm expression and said that it looked like he was clearly not going to listen to him. He ran towards him and said loudly that they would destroy and plunder this pathetic village. However, to his surprise, he ran past him very quickly. He turned to him with a shocked expression and thought that he hadn't seen his movements. Did he come from behind? He put the blade of his sword to his throat and said that he must withdraw his troops. This was the last warning. He was very scared because of what happened, raised his hands and agreed to it. He spoke to his soldiers and said that they all must retreat and quickly get out of here. Cindy looked at this and said that the Rosa's troops were retreating. When they all ran away, he turned around and said that they all did well. The villagers were happy about what happened, and he loudly said that they won. Carrot watched this and said with a smile that it finally happened. Everyone was celebrating this victory and discussing something. Dodoria called the master and asked if they should let them go like this. He agreed and said that they saw the difference in their strength. Even Octo couldn't help them. That was all. He didn't think they would come here again. He said that he was right, as always. One of the demi-humans called out to Lady Kororo and asked how she was feeling. She said that she was fine. The protagonist approached her and said that it was good that she was also okay. She said that she was sorry for having to save her. She was just in the way. He said with a smile that friends need to be rescued, and he was grateful that she fought alongside them. She plucked up her resolve and called the master. He remembered something and said that they should quickly return to the village. After all, she hadn't even seen her father. The guy said that the head of the village, that's great news. She agreed with this, and then they went to Tenma. Later, they reached the village. She saw her father and called him with a confused look. He turned around, called her by name, ran to her, and they hugged. She said in a joyful tone that she was very glad that he was safe. He called her by name and said that he was sorry for making her worry. She asked with a worried look where Mom was. Wasn't she with him? He denied it, and MC said that some captured demi-humans were still in Rosas, but they would arrive here soon. If it weren't for her and the others, they wouldn't have been able to win the battle. He was very grateful to her. He patted her on the shoulder and said that she fought bravely. She was their pride. She said with tears in her eyes that it wasn't her strength. She couldn't have done anything alone. She didn't believe in anything. She only thought that she couldn't change anything. However, after arriving in this village, she changed. He called her by name with a surprised expression, and she said that she could never have imagined that this joyful day would come when a man would call her friend. She is grateful to the Lord and glad that she believed in him. Her father said that on behalf of their people, they would like to repay him. They will do everything in their power. He said that he only had one request. He wants to protect these lands and the people who live here. He extended his hand to them and said that therefore they can always call if they are in any danger. Kororo extended her hand to him and said that they too will become one people and stand on their feet. He shook her hand and said that he was counting on them. A few days later, he thought that all the demi-humans had returned to their settlements. She was finally reunited with her mother. Rosas still needs to recover, so he's temporarily replacing the Lord here. They're also clearing out the aftermath of the battle. He picked up an arrow from the ground and said it would take some time. Cindy walked next to him and said there had been quite a fight here. However, together, they would handle it quickly. The demi-human village is recovering quickly, as expected of dwarves. When she recalls that everything happened because of Acto, anger immediately creeps in. He said that, speaking of which, he's supposed to be put on trial soon. Let the state deal with him, and they'll try their best. She agreed, and he said the road narrows here. They should split up further. He'll go deeper into the forest. She said she'll continue checking this area then. He went further and saw many arrows embedded in a tree. He continued walking, collecting arrows, and said that he'd finally gone deep. It's so beautiful here. So this is the deepest part of the White Wolf Forest? He didn't even know there was a place like this here. It's good that the battle didn't affect this place. He was very surprised when he heard an unfamiliar voice asking who he was. He started looking around with a confused look and asked what that voice was. It was coming from there. He walked further and was very surprised when he saw a large white wolf. He asked if he was the one who protected the forest. He asked with a surprised expression if he was the great Hakuro. He said, with a little surprise, that someone still remembers this. He is Fenrir, who was called that. He thought with a surprised expression that this is a god worshipped by demi-humans. He asked why he, a divine beast, is here. He said that he had no strength left. He was so weakened that he could not protect the forest. He protected it in its place. He is grateful to him on behalf of all the inhabitants of the forest. He was confused by this and said that he asked him to raise his head. He also damaged the forest during the battle. He stood up and said that he understood that victory could not be achieved without losses. He invited him to take a walk. They went further into the forest, and Dailuk said that the destruction was most noticeable here. He examined the place and said that it was a terrible sight. They saved their strength for such occasions. He took out a pendant with a magic stone and said that all their remaining power was here. He looked at it and asked, "Is this a magic stone?" Fenrir said that this was not just a magic stone, but a treasure passed down from generation to generation by the Lord of the Forest. Its power will be revealed if magic is poured into it. It seems that with his magic, it will suit him. He was surprised by what he heard and asked, "Is he going to give him such a precious treasure?" He handed it to him and said that he will understand everything as soon as he touches the stone. He touched this magic stone and was surprised when the magic stone flew up. It flew several meters into the air, emitting bright rays of light in different directions. After what happened, the flora throughout the forest began to quickly recover and plants began to grow again. He looked around in surprise and asked if the forest had really recovered. The stone descended and said that the magic has an effect that corresponds only to the nature of the forest. Also, only the master of this forest can skillfully use it. The protagonist was surprised by this information and asked, "Does this mean he is the master of the forest?" He doesn't even know what to think. Fenrir said that the forest chose him. He is worthy of inheriting the magic stone and its power. The stone does not contain his magic, but he will keep an eye on them. He called him by name and said that from now on he will be on his own. After these words, he began to leave and dissolve. He looked at the stone in his hand with a serious expression and squeezed it. Later in the village, everyone gathered outside, preparing various dishes and drinks, and Cindy said that it was a bit presumptuous, but she would speak for the master. They were able to win this battle, thanks to all of them, and today's event is their gratitude to them. They should celebrate Tenma's victory and drink. The villagers began drinking, eating various dishes, and discussing something with happy faces. Kuroto called the master and said that she was grateful for his invitation. He greeted her and said that he was grateful for their coming. He was glad to build a place where they could thank both the demi-humans and the elves. They were united by this victory. He was grateful to them all. The villagers approached them and asked what they were discussing here. Were they talking about the master's exploits? They should share with them too. He will tell them how the master saved them when they were brainwashed. She laughed, bowed to him, and said that she would also go listen to this heroic story. She cannot take him only for herself. Several people came up to him and told the master that he would pour him some wine. He could too. He, looking confused, asked for forgiveness and said that he had better go get some water. He left them and thought that he did not even notice how he reached the well. Cindy came to him, called him and asked what he was doing here. He turned to her, called her by name, and she said that everyone would get lonely without him. He said that he was just a little shy. He had an idea and said that they could walk together for a while. She was surprised by this, slightly embarrassed, and agreed to it. They started walking. He looked up and said that the starry sky in Tenma was much more beautiful than in the capital. At first, after his exile, he didn't know what to do, but now he's glad he moved here. Here he was able to meet Cindy and the others. She said with a smile that she thought so too. She was glad that she appeared in this era. She also met him, sir. For her, the most beautiful sky is the one you can look at with him. She noticed a shooting star in the sky, pointed her finger and warned him about it. He said that they probably wouldn't have time to make a wish. She said with a happy expression that they could still make a wish. He looked at the sky and said, "But then, let everyone live in peace." He turned to her, called her by name and asked what she wished for. She said with a smile that it was a secret. She offered to go back and he agreed. A few days later, at the court of Getha's country, the judge loudly announced that the trial was beginning. Octo Higgins, the defendant who committed a Class A crime, and his accomplice, Doltrin, the first defendant, will be sentenced to life imprisonment for abusing his magical abilities. He said with a calm expression that it was surprising they even let him live. The judge said that the second defendant is accused of controlling the territory and its inhabitants. as well as discriminating against demihumans. He is sentenced to exile on the island for overthrowing the previous head of Rosas. Akto was outraged by this and loudly asked if he even knew who he was. He was the son of the Higgins family. The judge banged his gavel several times and said that the Duke approved this punishment. The decision of this court is equal to the decision of the king and will never be reversed. MC thought that this was how the standoff with Rosas ended. As a result of the government's decision, Rosas officially became Tenma territory and thus came under its jurisdiction. Then they came to inspect Rosas. Balak followed him and said that so this is Rosas. He brought him here because this is a dangerous place. He turned to him and said that he didn't know yet. It just couldn't hurt to be careful. He stood in front of him and said that he needed to be prepared for emergencies. He called his name and said that he trusted him with the rest. He nodded and said in a calm tone that of course he would handle everything quickly. He said that then he could finish the rest of the inspection. He agreed, walked further through the city, and thought that at first glance it was a completely ordinary city. However, this is a city that Akto ruled for a long time. You need to be on your guard. Still, there are suspicious people here. His attention was drawn to a man who loudly said in an alley that he must get it. He came to the voice and peeked out from around the corner. The man pinned the child against the wall and asked with a smirk, "He stole something, didn't he?" Diluk looked at this with a serious expression on his face and asked, "One trouble after another?" The guy asked, "A strange incident happened in a strange place, right?" The boy asked for forgiveness with a worried expression, and he said with a displeased look that his apologies weren't worth a penny. He couldn't just come empty-handed. What should he do with it now? He wanted to answer with a tense expression, but couldn't because of fear. He walked up to them, pushed his hand away, and loudly asked what he was doing here. The man became indignant and asked who the hell he was. He said with a serious expression that he didn't know what happened here, but he was just a kid. He asked with a smirk why he should suffer here because of an unfulfilled promise. This city is their business territory. They entrusted this guy with one task. The boy apologized and said that, however, he couldn't steal. The man said that they told him to steal jewelry. There is always a shortage of something in Rosas. You can sell anything. He thought with a serious expression, "Do they sell stolen goods here?" The man pulled out a knife and said that if he didn't give up the goods, he would cut him on the spot. The protagonist became wary because of this, turned to the boy and said that he shouldn't approach him. He understood that he wouldn't have time to draw his sword and rolled towards the bandit. He was confused by what happened, and then he kicked his leg and he fell to the ground in pain. He called the boy to follow him, put him on his back, and walked out of the alley, but stopped when he saw a crowd of bandits standing at the entrance. They looked at him and with a serious expression, one of them asked, "Haven't seen him before? Where was he taking him? He shouldn't interfere with their business." He looked around and thought that they were surrounded. It would be difficult to fight and protect the child. He had an idea to buy himself some time, turned around and said that he should hold on tighter. He was confused by this, and MC jumped high and used the Robello style, the moonsword dance. He released flames around himself and the bandits asked, "So he has skill?" He thought with a calm expression that now he needs to direct the flames into the sky. Balak noticed this and thought that this was the young master, which meant that something had happened. He quickly ran outside and loudly called out to the master. The bandits turned at his voice and asked, "Who the hell is this old man, his friend?" He understood everything, looking at what was happening, grabbed the sword and said that he saw right through them. He ran towards the crowd of bandits with a calm expression and defeated several of them with quick blows. Who would you summon first? A powerful warrior, a genius builder, or someone who can create unlimited food? Write in the comments and don't forget to like.